Hey everyone, my name is Dennis. I am the founder at Six Nomads. I hope really soon Ksenia will join me, my co-founder. And we decided to run a remote conference today, and I believe everyone of you already tired of webinars and the things like that when just everyone listen to the panelists. So I'm highly ask you to turn on your videos and turn on your mix when it's needed. So it's better to see your faces. We can see Sasha here. Sasha is our first speaker today. But before Sasha will start, can you please turn on the videos and just say hi? And if you say, where are you now, and introduce yourself, it would be really great. So I'm currently in Moscow, Russia. So Sasha, I believe she's in California, is it correct?
I'm actually in Philadelphia. So I'm on the East Coast of the United States. I used to work and live in San Francisco, California, but I'm in Philadelphia. Okay. Hi, everybody.
Yes. Hi. So I believe it's 8 hours difference or so between us. And please, others, just I understand that sometimes it's not comfortable to turn on the video, but if you can just do it and introduce yourself, it would be a great start for all of us.
I can introduce myself. I'm Aref. I live in Tehran, Iran. And
perfect.
Yeah, and I'm working for a German company.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Arthur. I'm living at Moscow and working for Sberbank.
Okay, yes, it's the biggest bank in Russia. It's really a huge one. Perfect. Okay.
Hello, I'm Sivanus. I'm Sivanus from Nigeria.
Oh, perfect. And do you work for a Nigerian company, for the local one, or globally?
For now, it's a local one.
Local one, okay.
Yeah.
And you're looking for global opportunities, or why remote conference is interesting for you?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So someone else?
This conference was interesting for me because I'm already working remotely for a company based in Berlin. Okay. So yeah, I was interested in what we want to present in this conference, and that is why I joined this meeting. So
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So anyone else want to introduce yourself? Yes, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hello. Oh, I don't know how to.
Jay, go ahead. Jay, go ahead. I see you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jay. I'm in Phuket, Thailand right now.
Okay.
But I'm originally from New York, America, or New Jersey, New York, New Jersey area, USA.
Perfect. Yeah. Did you move to the Thailand to live, or like is it like you just decided to go during that crazy time like pandemic or something like that?
I mean, for the past, I'd say about 3 years, I've been like nomading. So I split my time between Asia, sometimes Europe and US, little bits of time in the US. That's how I was living previously, but obviously now with Corona, like that's not possible at all. Well, I mean, it's potentially possible. I could go somewhere else, but yeah, I kind of got stuck here, but I was planning to live here anyways. It was like up on the list of staying, but I mean, before Corona, it was very flexible. So it was kind of like, it was a good and a bad thing. Before it was so flexible to like move around, but that obviously is not the most efficient thing. Yeah, that I kind of got stuck here and I decided to stay.
Perfect. Yes, Ksenia had the same problem. She stuck at Bali for 5 or 6 months. My founder here, Ksenia, just say hi to everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Yes, it was the same problem. It's nice to have people like from all over the world today. So we have a Zoom meeting here, and also we broadcast that meeting on YouTube. I would say that like pluses to be here because you can just interact with the speakers and ask questions. If you want to just listen, you can go on YouTube. You can find the live translation on our website. And I want to spend 3 or 5 minutes and to say what we want to cover today. So we have two perspectives today. So we have the employee perspective, and Sasha will cover it. She will tell how to be a leader when you're running a remote company, how to be like a remote leader in a remote company. And those other panelists will cover how to be and how to build a diversity team. And other perspective, I would say, and it's a founder or entrepreneur perspective, is how to build a remote startup and how remote startups like grow. And we will have like two investors at the end of the conference, and they will tell you how they like score the remote startups, and is it possible if you run a remote company to attract like not just the clients from overseas but money for overseas as well. But before we start, we have a couple of minutes before Sasha presentation. I want to say a few words about Six Nomads. So Six Nomads is a product to hire remote developers, like software engineers. We believe that the talent is split equally, but opportunities are not, and there is no need to fish in a small pond if you can fish in a big one. So on the other hand, we see that when you hire remotely, the job boards, it's not the best place to hire engineers. So we decided to reimagine the process of hiring like remote engineers. And now, if you're an employee, you can go through the vetting process. It's 3 stages of assessment and get the list of the, I would say, offers or companies who are not present on the job board. So it's quite pre-vetted list of companies. And if you're on the employer side, you will get the engineers and software developers who are not spending time on job boards. So basically we give access the best companies to the best people possible from overseas. So that's our mission. And we conduct, it's the first event like remote, it's the first remote conference for us. And also we run remote stand-ups. We try to run it like every Tuesday. Lola, can you please share the link to everyone? So, and we invite the founders of remote startups and the leaders, the investors, and they share their knowledge. We don't record those sessions. So I would say it's a closed community where you can just get insights, how to raise money if you're a founder, how to build the product if you're a remote founder as well, how to hire people. We don't record those sessions because we just try to be as honest and as possible and answer like even really difficult questions. Okay, so let's start with Sasha. Sasha, can you just give us a perspective about your background? What do you do before we start with the actual presentation?
Sure. So actually in my presentation, I talk a little bit about my background. So I can pull up some stuff. I'd like to show some visuals and I can tell you kind of where I'm coming from. And let's do the screen share then.
One organizational, I would say, ask, because please don't interrupt the speaker. We will have 10 minutes after the presentation, like to question and answers. Sasha, if you you can always say just ask questions, and but please don't interrupt because everyone with the video and it's going to be really difficult and it's going to be mess here. Okay.
Yes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you about 20 minutes or less of content, and I do want to have questions from you. So I'm getting my screen all ready right now. Can everybody hear me okay? We good? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Okay. Can everybody see one slide that says the 4 must-know skill areas to be an effective virtual leader? Okay, we're off to a good start. All right, so what I want you to get out of our time together today is I want you to be aware of some key virtual leadership concepts. So I'm going to talk to you about a concept called distance bias, and I'm going to give you some explanation of what that is in a minute. And I want you to be ready. I want you to know what these 4 must-have skill areas are to be an effective virtual leader. and I want you to be change agents. I want to give you a couple of tactics that you can take back to your teams and use them as you're working across distance with your teams. So let's start out with, this is not normal remote work, what's happening right now. It's not normal remote work. I've been a 10-year remote worker, and normal remote work should be a seamless environment. It should feel seamless to whoever it is that you're interacting with. You'll see in a second, like a big part of my career working remotely was working with in a large company that many people were co-located together, and I was remote. But what's happening right now is extreme work-life integration. So we've got, for those of us who might be parents in the audience, does anybody have kids at home with them right now? I'm looking to see if we've got people with kids at home. A couple, okay. Right, for me, I have 2 kids at home. I'm supposed to also be helping them with school. My husband and I are supposed to be helping them with school in the house while also working. Because we're in a pandemic, we might also be responsible for helping some of our family members who need to be taken care of. There might be people in our households that are sick or ill. So we need to remember as managers within our organization, or if you're working with clients, for example, that there is a lot going on outside of what you can see on the screen when you're videoing in with someone. So we have to be really empathetic right now to the fact that we're juggling a lot. So I start off with this to say that I understand if maybe a kid comes into the frame as I'm talking today and sits on your lap, or if you have a pet that's making noise in the background. This is a whole new frontier that we're now figuring out as we go in this remote work. So as Dennis asked, what's my background? So you can kind of understand where I'm coming from here. So actually, I'm a marketer by trade. So I spent 18 years working in marketing. So I worked for advertising agencies first. So these are 2 names of agencies here in the United States. And then I spent 14 years working for the Clorox company. So the Clorox company is a multinational company. Majority of our sales are here in the US. It's a $6 billion company. Is anybody familiar with Clorox? So Clorox bleach, Clorox disinfecting wipes, etc. So I spent 14 years there working in marketing, sales, new product innovation. And of those 14 years, I actually worked fully remotely for 8 of them. So about 2 years ago, I left to start my own company to help teach the skills to lead and communicate and collaborate across distance. And so I've been working with many different companies and teams across many different industries, from the car industry to consumer packaged goods to healthcare, to help them during this time, pre-COVID and now during the pandemic, on how to now work in this virtual environment, because many of us were so used to being co-located, at least with part of our team. Or many of us, if you're in sales, we're very used to being able to have an in-person relationship with our clients or our new business prospects. So I went remote back in 2010. So I was living in San Francisco at first, working for Clorox, the $6 billion company. I was working from their headquarters. And in 2010, I decided to move to Philadelphia. So in the United States, that's the other coast. So I moved from West Coast to East Coast, so 3,000 miles away. And I was an experiment. I was one of the very first people to work fully remotely for this company. Experiment here. So I had to relearn how to do everything from a distance. And so this is a picture of one of the last teams that I led at Clorox. It was a team that was responsible for $250 million worth of sales. And it was a team that was many people co-located together in the headquarters office, but also other people who were located in different parts of the United States. And again, me in Philadelphia. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today, it was important before the pandemic, is important right now, and will continue to be important into the future, because organizations are now kind of figuring out what is that right balance of working fully remotely or working in a hybrid or virtual environment. So pre-pandemic, a lot of organizations were in this bucket in here in the middle. They were called geographically distributed or hybrid or virtual organizations. So geographically distributed, meaning you have a headquarters in one area, maybe some satellite offices. Hybrid, meaning you have some offices, but people who are also fully remote. But the pandemic, at least in the US, caused a lot of these organizations to overnight shift into a frog, a fully remote organization. And I would never tell an organization to jump into being a frog without having skills, processes, policies in place in order to enable that. But that's where we're finding ourselves right now, is that really rapid transition to figuring out how to work in this frog environment. And as time goes, and depending on what's going on with your country in terms of the pandemic right now, you might start seeing this fluidity back and forth. So maybe some offices are opening back up where some people are coming back into an office, but some people are still staying fully remote. So I foresee the future being a hybrid future where the majority of large organizations will have office sites still, but we'll continue to have some people who are either working part-time remotely or fully remotely. And that's why these leadership skills are so important, not just now, but into the future. So before I get into those leadership skills, I want you to have awareness of two unconscious biases that we need to be aware of that are playing against us when we are working in these virtual, hybrid, or fully remote organizations. So the first one is called distance bias. This is something that the Neuro Leadership Institute has proven, and it's part of their unconscious bias model. So distance bias is our brain's natural tendency to put more importance on the people and the things that are closer to us than there's those that are further away. So where this pops up a lot is when you have people who are co-located together in an office building in one place, and then you have other people that are in the location minority who are either working fully remotely or working from a smaller office somewhere else. And this distance bias comes up. So the big group of people that are co-located oftentimes are thinking more top of mind of the people that are nearer to them. Has anybody experienced this distance bias where there's more value put on the people that are actually sitting together and near each other? No?
Yes, we had started 6 Nomads as an office company, and then we decided to go remote. And that was it's a huge problem.
Yes, and so this distance bias comes up, especially when you have office buildings. But what a lot of people might be feeling right now, if you're in a frog or fully remote organization, is something called recency bias, which means your brain is putting more value on the people that you have heard from or seen more recently. So, for example, if you're managing a team of people, you might find yourself thinking more about the last 2 or 3 people who sent you an email or a message on Slack or did a video conference with you. And you might have forgotten about part of your team that might be a little bit more quiet. And this is something that as a manager, if you're managing people, you need to be really aware of. And you need to create ways to overcome that so that everybody, regardless of their location and regardless of how quiet they are or not, stays at equal with you. Okay, so these are the two concepts that I just want you to know of, these unconscious biases, something that our brain is doing. And here's my virtual leadership success framework. So these 4 key areas to be a successful virtual leader. And when I say leader, I don't mean that you have to have a fancy title or you have to have a lot of people reporting into you. When I say leader, we are all leaders. We are all responsible for coming up with new ideas for our companies. We are all responsible for...
We are all responsible for coming up with new idea.
Hello, hi. We exactly what I was saying earlier. We have somebody joining us who has a buddy with them. Kensia, could you maybe or Zenia, Oh, that's no problem. No problem. Just we'll make sure we mute people as that happens. No problem. All right, so back to being a leader. So we're all responsible for leadership within our teams, within our organizations. So I don't want you looking at this and saying, this doesn't apply to me because I don't have a fancy title or people reporting into me. So these 4 areas, oftentimes organizations come to me and they would say, what are the technology tools that we need to work in a virtual team? And I always have them stop and take a step back. And the tech tools are important. You need to have the right tools and everybody needs to know how to use them. But these other 3 areas are actually even more important. And that's what today I'm going to quickly go over each of these other 3 areas to give you a sampling of that. So we're going to talk about expectation setting, relationship building and culture building, and some of these virtual skills. What are the skills that we were used to doing as in-person teams that we now need to do and take account the distance between us? So let's start with expectation setting. So many of you are probably feeling this right now: video meeting fatigue and communication overload. So I'm hearing this across my clients, across all industries, that it's back-to-back meetings. We're having Zoom fatigue of being on video calls, and we're getting so many emails, or we're getting so pinged and dinged with all different types of communication, right? Our Slack messages or emails, whatever other tool that you're using. And so it's really important that within your teams, you take a step back and talk about the expectations for your team in terms of what are the communication norms that you want to set for your team. What tools do you want to use for what reasons, for example, getting really clear on that. And as you're doing that, you want to have a conversation around communication in these 2 buckets. Synchronous communication, meaning live communication, expecting real-time response. So this is synchronous right now. We're all together live here. It's being recorded so that later it can be asynchronous, meaning not live, that people can watch it later. But you want to have a balance of that synchronous and asynchronous. Asynchronous meaning not real time. So emails, for example, are another example of not real time. What I find happening in a lot of organizations that we're not used to working in a virtual atmosphere is that they're relying way too much on synchronous communication, because that's what they were used to in the office. They were used to showing up in the office, spending all day together, live communication, and then going home. So think about how you're communicating within your teams, and do you need to have a better balance of these? This is especially important as you're working across different time zones. So I love the fact that today we have people from all over the world in different time zones, and I would imagine many of your teams are across different time zones. So when you're having these conversations with your teams about these communication norms or these expectations, you might also want to have a conversation around setting some boundaries. So I started off the conversation around this is not normal remote work. For many of us, we're having to also juggle things in our personal lives that we normally wouldn't have to during the workday. So to help people with some boundaries and to avoid burnout, because we want to avoid the burnout here, because that will make it even harder. If people are burning out, that will make it even harder to get to your business objectives. You want to have a conversation about things like core meeting hours. What are the times when we expect everybody to be available for live meetings, especially across time zones? Or what do you expect in terms of responsiveness? So do you expect that if you send an email at 10 p.m. at night that somebody's going to respond? I hope that the answer is no, and that you could say, you know, if I send an email in late at night, that I do not expect a response until it's working hours for you the next day. So my point in bringing this up, all of this is in that blue box we talked about, expectation setting, is that you need to be really intentional, really strategic about setting those expectations with your team. The next section I want to talk about is the virtual skills. So I'm going to pop into the chat here, let's see here. If I can do this, can I? Yes, everyone, I'm going to pop into the chat a link on my website that you can go and you can download a free resource. Part of this resource has a very simple skills assessment. These top 10 areas of crucial and critical skills to be a successful virtual leader. And you can use this to self-assess, to assess just you, or you could use it with your team to see who feels comfortable in some of these skill areas and who needs help. Because if you identify somebody who's an expert in your team in one of these areas, they could actually teach that skill to your team. Or if you find an area that a lot of people are not feeling comfortable with, you might want to consider bringing somebody in to help teach your team. So you can see on this list, there are things like leading effective and efficient virtual meetings, because those meetings are different than when we huddle all together in a room. Influencing across distance. This is actually what I think is the most important skill, and a skill that people don't realize until they've been working remotely for a while that they need to have. So it's about thinking about, how do you influence other people with your thinking? How do you get them to decide on something in your favor when you can't run into them in an office setting? And it's especially important right now as most organizations are working as frogs or fully remote organizations. And then there are things like, how do you manage a direct report who's not sitting next to you, or how do you work with a manager that's remote? So I won't go through all of these right now, but there is that resource for you that I put the link in the chat, so you can find that there. While we're together today, I wanted to give you something really tactical, something you could go use. So let's talk about something specific to virtual meetings, because I'm sure all of us are responsible for facilitating virtual meetings. So the first thing that I want to start with is back to that synchronous and asynchronous idea we just talked about, is before you send an invite for a meeting, I want you to first ask yourself, do we really need a live meeting for this? That's usually people just, put the meeting on the calendar and then figure it out as they go. But many of the things that you're probably setting up meetings for could be handled in a different way. Maybe they could be handled through Slack. Maybe they could be handled through email. Maybe they could be handled through a Google document where people can comment asynchronously or not live. So first, I beg of you all to first think, do I really need a meeting, or is there another way I could get to my outcome? If you say, yes, I still need a meeting, here's another tool for you. It's this 5 Ps framework. And again, on the download from my website, this framework is there as well. So you don't have to take the notes if you don't want to. And it's how to build a good agenda prior to the meeting to make sure that you have a really efficient, effective, engaging, and inclusive meeting. Those are kind of the 4 key areas to have a really successful meeting. And usually people get the first part down, the purpose, like why are we meeting? That usually people kind of have that figured out. But where people usually don't think this level of detail is, what is the product of the meeting? What is the specific intended outcome of the meeting? So for example, if I was leading a meeting where we were, the purpose was to finalize a timeline for a project. To get really specific, the product of the meeting should be, we will end the meeting when we have a completed timeline and we have identified the top 2 risk areas for the timeline. So really specific on what we're trying to achieve. Then from there, the next 3 Ps will flow. So process. How are you going to actually facilitate that discussion to get to a decision? So if your team was used to huddling together in a conference room and putting sticky notes on the wall, how are you going to do that in a virtual environment? Do you need to use a new software tool like Mural, for example? Or how are you going to do this? So thinking through the process, thinking through the pre-work. So maybe you can assign some work to be done asynchronously, meaning not live, that people can do ahead of time so that you spend a shorter amount of time together live. And the last thing is thinking about the people that you invite. Trying to have a small group of the right people. Oftentimes we like to be inclusive, so we invite lots of people, but really we should be inviting the people who are adding the most value to the meeting. The other people who are not adding value to the meeting, they can read the meeting notes later. So this is one tool, again, it's on the download from my website that you could start to use to create an agenda for all of your meetings. I think it's really important to have these agendas ahead of time for the meeting so people can come prepared. They know what value they can add. They know what value they are getting out of the meeting. So I'm going to give you one more skill area with some tactical tips, and then we're going to pause for questions. So if you want to start populating some questions in the chat right now, you can. And when I finish this section, also, we can take live questions if you want to come off of mute then as well. So this last area, this yellow box, relationship building and culture building. So I want us to all get on the same page in terms of what do we mean by culture? Because oftentimes I hear people say that team culture is the same as having virtual happy hours and doing those fun activities. Well, having fun is part of your team culture. But really what team culture is, it's the values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors shared by a team. It's how people work together toward a common goal, how they treat each other. And different teams can have different cultures within the same company. If you have a large company, like I worked for that $6 billion company, you have some company values and a company culture. But the team that I led, I showed you that picture, the team that I led, we had to then figure out what was our own team culture within that kind of bigger umbrella of the company. And what's interesting about this is that when you're working in a virtual team, when you're not all co-located together, it can be very hard to know what the culture is of the team because you have these like virtual curtains between you where you only get little peeks into this, depending on whether you are reading into a digital communication like email or Slack, or a little peek when you have a meeting and you see how people are behaving and treating each other. So what to do about this? So I do a whole workshop on building culture in distributed teams, but part of that workshop is setting some of these foundational building blocks, is to think about, have we established our team values? And if not, we need to have a discussion to actually establish them, make them public, recognize and reinforce them. Also, have we established team goals? So not just individual goals, but are we sure that cross-functionally we're all aligned to the same goals on the team? And lastly, the operating principles. So back to expectation setting. Have we defined what these expectations are for our teams, and have we made that public and transparent? So I know many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with GitLab. GitLab is a great standard to look at their employee handbook, for example, in terms of how they make their operating principles, their values, their culture really accessible and searchable through their online handbook. All right, so this is where I'm going to pause for the questions. I put up on here all of my contact information in the case that you want to reach out to me in case you have the need for a workshop for your team. I do workshops everywhere from how to lead effective virtual meetings to how to manage direct reports that are remote, to how to influence and how to build culture. And then here are the social media channels and other ways to connect with me. All right, so Dennis, would you prefer me to use the chat and use the questions off the chat, or how do you want to run this?
Yes, can I ask the first question, and then please just turn on the video and ask the question, and please don't interrupt each other, just one, and let's have just 10 minutes for questions and go forward to that, okay? So my first question is, as I see, there are like more and more open positions called head of remote. it's basically the leader of the remote team. And I've seen the position, that kind of position at Facebook, I believe any other companies as well. And what do you think? What is the person head of remote? What is the responsibility of that person? Is it technical person or more managerial person, or what is it? It's difficult to understand basically, because most of the companies who hire head of the remote, it's an IT companies, but I don't understand what is the main responsibilities of that kind of person. And do you see the future of, it's a new position for the world, as I see
Yes.
It wasn't on scene like for like, I believe the only company has that position like 5 years ago, it was GitLab, or I don't know. So,
yes.
But now it's really common. Can you say a few words about that, please?
Sure. So when I was at Clorox, and I told you I was working remotely for them for 8 years, toward the end of my career there, I had been already helping the Clorox community of employees work better together across distance in my spare time. I was running a business and I was leading what's called an employee resource group. That was the first of its kind, a virtual workforce employee resource group to help the company work better across the different office sites. And 2 years ago, I created a role description for myself that said that I wanted to be responsible for helping the organization adapt to the future of work, to help with the collaboration across distance. I didn't know what to call it though. I just knew there was a need there, but I didn't know what to call it. I think I called it something like Director of Corporate Collaboration. And Clorox at the time, they said, I don't know if that's necessary. You know, we don't need a full-time position for that. No, thank you. And then what I started to see is, like you mentioned, GitLab. A couple months after that, I think GitLab created a head of remote. I think Twitter might have a head of remote that's also in charge of a couple of other things. There are these heads of remote. Maybe I think Prezi has one as well in the tech industry, as you said, Dennis, in the tech industry. I actually think for the majority of organizations, they need a head of hybrid, not a head of remote, a head of hybrid. Because as we mentioned earlier, with that spectrum of remoteness, it's actually most companies are going to have some office sites and some fully remote employees or partially remote employees. And your question about what is the role of that person? Well, I think that the head of hybrid role that should be created, I think what that role should be responsible for is a couple of things. I think that they should be responsible for overseeing the workplace and workforce strategy. So they should be at the table. It should be somebody senior at the table who can help think more broadly about how are the different office sites going to interact with each other. Are we going to have a hub system? Are we going to have one headquarters and everybody else remote? Thinking about that strategy. And then they also need to be responsible for the strategy and execution of things like skills development. How do we make sure everybody has the virtual leadership skills like we were talking about today to be able to work across distance in these hybrid teams? They need to be aware of diversity and inclusion. So I talk a lot about location diversity and inclusion. So making sure that the plans are put in place to overcome those unconscious biases I told you about. They need to be responsible for having diversity and inclusion programs and strategies in place to overcome distance bias, recency bias, because of people being in all these different locations. So it's, in my opinion, it's a role that doesn't exist yet, head of hybrid, and it's a very strategic role that has to oversee strategy and also the execution.
Thank you very much. So I see other questions in the chat. Do everyone want to ask the question like publicly with the video? Does anyone has the questions to Sasha?
Hi, Sasha. This is Jill. How are you? I don't know if my video is working or not. I was having some issues, but I know my voice works. One of the questions actually is for this, when you set up these meetings and you're from a culture of very inclusion, how do you politely start excluding and change that bigger company culture to have the meetings more focused when they have to be remote?
Yeah, so first of all, Jill and I used to work together at Clorox. I can recognize the voice. Hi, Jill. And so Jill, you're asking about how to reduce the invite list when we're used to being, yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes, that comes up often. So I would suggest for the first time when you're going to reduce the invite list that you actually reach out to the people that you are considering disinviting before you just send an invite and don't include them, and have a conversation around why you are not including them in the invitation any longer. So for example, what I see oftentimes in consumer packaged goods companies like Clorox, what sometimes can happen is you end up inviting your peer and then also their boss. So you're like doubling up across different functions, sales, marketing, whatever. And so you have these layers. And so getting really clear about who should be there. Should it be your peer? Should it be their boss? Who has the decision-making rights, or who's the one who should be inputting? Sometimes you will hear from your marketing counterpart, for example, yes, I as the brand manager want to be there, but I also want my associate marketing manager there because it's a training opportunity for them. Well, in that case, you then know what the roles are. You know that person is there just as a training opportunity. And okay, maybe you would say for a couple of the meetings that makes sense. Then if somebody is fighting you on why they want to be there, even though you don't think that they are adding value, I think it's getting clear from them on what value they think that they will be adding and why it's important for them to be there instead of just reading the notes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Sacha, this is Luis. I wanted to ask you about companies that didn't used to work remote before the pandemic, and after the pandemic, they been forced to do it. So what are the suggestions for them to feel welcome new remote workers after the pandemic? And after that, the second question is, how do you as a company help them to build meaningful relationships on things that they don't know yet?
Yes, this is hard. It's hard to start as a fully remote employee in a new company during a pandemic. So I'm glad you're asking that question. And I think that back to those 4 boxes that I shared with you on the screen before, that yellow box, right? That relationship building, that culture building, usually that happens, it gets kickstarted when we are together, but we don't have that opportunity. So you need to think through a couple of things. One is, how do you start to form those relationships? Video helps. So being on video, being able to see each other, starting to feel like a connection across the distance. Pairing that person up with other people in the organization to do virtual coffee chats is one way for them to also get to start to network within the organization. The workshop that I do on influencing across distance, one of the first steps in that workshop is to do a stakeholder map, which means to map out all the people that you need to influence up, down, and across the organization. That exercise is actually really helpful for the manager of the new person to actually do with the new hire, because the new hire will not understand kind of how everything's working, who they need to be communicating with inside the company, outside the company. And so to sketch that out for the person can provide much needed context. And the last thing I'll say on that too is to develop those relationships again. I do a couple of tools. So one is kind of a one-pager. I have everybody on my team create a one page about them, their style, a little bit about their background, what their personal values are, and can share that live with the organization, or asynchronously can post that to a shared drive, a shared folder, people that can have access to it. Or they could even present themselves on a video. So use Loom or different recording software and have them do a little welcome video of themselves, and have the rest of the team also do a welcome video for them.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, it's Jay. We have
Hi.
time for one more question. Yeah, hi. So I've been working remotely, but I'm not too familiar with, working with a bigger organization. or a bigger corporation for like as an employee remotely. I'm just curious, do you know if there's any kind of like trend or if there's any requirement for employees of remote employees of larger companies to install like surveillance on their computer? And if so, like what's the percentage rate of how many people or how many companies are utilizing this kind of software to monitor employees? How prevalent is it, or if it's optional, not optional, or do people have the option to use this kind of software or not? Just curious.
Sure. Can I ask you why you're asking? Because that'll help me with my answer.
Well, I mean, I've only worked in office at corporations. So I never worked remotely full time for another company. So I'm just if I decide to pursue that route to work full time remotely for a bigger corporation, I'd wonder if I have to be prepared for that kind of conversation or that kind of issue that might arise.
Yes. So I think it's very company specific. It's industry specific. If anybody were ask me my point of view on it, I would suggest not doing that. I feel, one of my values is to start from a place of trust. One of my values is to know that everybody is trying to do their best in the role that they've been assigned to do within the company. And in order to track productivity, I think a better way to do that is through a performance management process, which would include having really specific performance objectives from the beginning, and a cadence and a regular check-in on how you're doing against those performance objectives throughout the year. So I can't answer your question in terms of the percentages of companies that are doing this or not doing this, but I can say that I don't think it should be the best practice to do this. I think instead there should be a broader performance management process.
Thank you very much, Sasha. Thank you very much for coming. I believe you can send the questions to Sasha email with sasha@virtualworkinsider.com, and please follow Sasha at Twitter. She shares the useful content. We have to move to another speaker. It's Shaheen. Hi, Shaheen.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes, just for everyone who just joined, we try to do that as friendly as possible. So we decided to run the conference just on Zoom. Please turn on your cameras. It's just easy to understand and to see your reactions. And the format is the following: we have 20 minutes of the panel and 10 minutes for answers and questions. When you ask the questions, please turn on your camera because it's easy to see and to understand who is asking. And I want to introduce Shaheen. Shaheen is the CEO and the founder at remoteteam.work. And I believe it's the person who Ivan will share the website. So it's, as far as I know, it's a software which is, you can hire the employees using remoteteam.com. You can pay the employees using the remoteteam.com. I believe Shaheen will give you more details what it's for and what is the current traction and how he sees. But his report is on different topic. But Shaheen, please do the introduction.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am so excited to talk about the diversity topic. To be honest, this is my third conference that I was talking about this topic, and the last one was unbelievable, amazing. And Dan, thank you very much for inviting me to Six Nomads. It's a community that I follow very closely and I really like because it's so active, and you guys are giving great value to everyone in the system actually. So thank you so much for inviting me. So I am I had 4 companies in Silicon Valley, and I had 4 companies in Istanbul where I am from. So I'm a very serial entrepreneur. I think I started my first company 20 years ago when I was 16 years old. And to be honest, I never had office in my life. So I actually don't know an office environment. Even I had a 100 people company in Turkey 25 years ago. We were not doing it. Sorry, 15 years ago, we didn't have an office. We were the first e-commerce company even in a third world country that has an office. And I moved to Silicon Valley 10 years ago. And I built my first company, Movilala, and we sold it to Giphy, and Giphy sold it to Snapchat. So I indirectly sold my first company to Snapchat. So the cool thing is I never had an office at that in Silicon Valley. This is my fourth company. So I always find like going to traffic, spending time in the office, wearing shoes, have to dress up. Like I never liked it. And I was lucky enough. And I remember very clearly, I had great investors in Silicon Valley. And when I was telling these guys, even like I have billionaires, CFO, big companies, they are all public info, amazing angel investors. When I was telling them 10 years ago, 8 years ago about remote work, they said, no, we don't believe in remote work. Hire local people, you're gonna get hired and acquired. Companies will buy you because you have a local team, right? Now, it's totally opposite. You talk with an investor, you talk with the community. It's unbelievable. You see, no, day one, go remote. And I always managed the remote teams for a very long time, and I was always a CTO, and our companies were engineering companies. When your companies are engineering, then you end up doing all the work in operations, the HR, hiring, firing, the document, all the computers, payrolls, tax compliance, all the issues. And then in 2019 summer, I decided to build remoteteam.com, which I actually now I can really do what I was doing for a very long time and give the service and the best practices that I learned over the years actually. And this today topic is, I really enjoy this topic. It's diversity and inclusion. And I actually trying to and this topic is very important in US. I think we are going to, this is the time of diversity. We call it, I call it in our company. So I always look like, I hear a lot of things about diversity, but I didn't hear anyone in that they totally nailed down the reason. And I was thinking like, what is the reason that we are discriminating to people? Okay, people are, let's say, we don't like different people, we are egoist, we are crazy, whatever, right? I was thinking like, what is the simplest reason that we can put it today and how remote can change that, right? And then I thought so much. I do deep meditation on this. And one day in the shower, I had it. It's location. If you think about diversity, why we are different or bad to each other is mostly diversity. Like people are from Ireland in the old days in America. People are from Africa. People are from Armenia. People are from Israel, right? Because location together, right? So we can oversimplify this, okay? But don't go to the human nature of our egos. But in reality, we are really some people are not very nice to other people who are coming from other locations, right? So remote work is removing boundaries, right? When you are taking the location out of the equation, then we are removing and we are eliminating the location. So when we eliminate the location, I believe when we have no location, like everyone is the same location, over Zoom, over Slack, over phone calls, whatever it is, everyone has the same distance. So when the location takes off, I believe one of the root causes of diversity will be gone. And we are seeing this because in remote work, who cares where you are from? Who cares what you are, right? Who cares you are coming from another country? And I think deep fake is a huge thing going on. Everyone will have a like totally different face in like 3 years, and even their lips will probably speak in their own language, right? So when the location is gone, having employees or team people from Ireland, Israel, Australia, Africa will make absolutely no difference to each other. Zero. So And what changed in the pandemic, sorry about this weird thing here. So what changed in the pandemic is companies sort of had to switch to remote, right? So the companies, okay, now sort of we accelerate the process of remote work, but I think remote work was already happening. In Silicon Valley, in tech, we were seeing this happening. And I think the biggest reason that it was happening is I believe we are living in an era called self-taught. People are learning by themselves, and people can become great engineers, great software developers, great marketers without going to a school, right? So people have a huge pool of smart people all around the world, and Zoom, Slack, these technologies were enabling companies to hire remotely. I think this trend was already starting, but after the pandemic, it just like super accelerated. The interesting thing, I believe, that might be a little bit different than many people believe. I believe companies are giving more importance to their employees right now in the pandemic. The weird thing here, if you look at corporate America, it's all about shareholder value maximization. That is what corporation means, right? But in the pandemic, they said, we don't care if we're gonna do profit or not. We are trying not to fire as much as people possible. So we will not fire people. We will keep the people. Instead of we're going to lose money maybe at the end of the day, but we want to keep the people because employees are more important. And when we have no offices, a huge cost is going down. So when the companies cut office expenses, I live in Cupertino, and in Cupertino, Apple spent $4 billion in their office, right? The people say 4 billion, but I believe it's double the price. So it means that for 10,000 people, they nearly spent 800,000, like $1 billion per person, right? Like it's crazy, just for one person. So I always say, like, if they send an RV in front of your house with a massager that will massage you with a private VPN, okay, you can still have the privacy. It will be better return of investment, and it will be cheaper than $1 million, right? And I saw this, I witnessed this in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco. Companies like WordPress were closing their offices in the South Park. So I think pandemic showed that the people are becoming the core of the company, and the biggest thing will be all digital, and it will be all around people. So, and I think the other thing that is changing, that will also change, and how we work together and how we'll actually include work, is this 8-hour work principle. And this principle made in England in the industrial age, that we work 8 hours, 8 hours labor, 8 hours rest, and 8 hours sleep, right? So we had this 8-hour work week, and I think this 8-hour, I look at this as, I really look at prison, office as a prison. It's very simple. When someone we want to punish in our society, what we do, we send them in a place for a limited time. It can be 5 days, 2 days, 1 day, or 1 hour, right? Some people go to, when they do something small, they go to prison for 2-3 hours, right? I really think office is a prison. It's a prison of mind. Okay, and the pros and cons is, now people are seeing that the cons are so much that having no office is way more efficient for companies, right? And when we don't have this 8-hour linear work structure, I definitely believe people will be more happier in life. People will have more time. We're gonna do asynchronous working, and we don't need to stuck in 8 hours in a place, and we don't need to stuck in 8 hours. So I believe when we are more happy, no location, and then we have to work remotely, I think the whole diversity and inclusion, diversity will be nearly eliminated 95%, and people will be included wherever you are, whatever you are, right? So another thing that I believe how remote work offers a good, interesting thing is the mobility. So when people are mobile, they can really work anywhere in the world. And I believe 5G will change this, because when you have 5G internet connection anywhere in the world, you can just open your laptop in Costa Rica with super fast speed, and you will have instant connection. You will have flexibility increase because there's no 8-hour craziness anymore. And your productivity goes the roof. And I witnessed this so many times. I built apps in my previous companies with 4 or 5 people that Apple or Facebook. I met with Mark Zuckerberg once, and he told me that what you guys build is ahead of Facebook in AR, because like when really 5, 6 people work together in a super happy environment remotely, wherever they are, when people are more happier and more flexible, it just opens up the creativity, right? And then all these things also lead to a diverse environment, right? So in our company, in remote team, we have people in Africa, we have people in South America, we have people in Russia, we have people in Turkey, we have people from East European, right? And when you have all these, when people have less ego, more happiness, more flexibility, by default, people are happy, right? By default, people are nice to each other. And then I see this whole thing becomes more allowing other different cultures to come in actually and decrease the diversity. So the general consensus of the work life start to dissolve after the pandemic. So of course our houses where we live is not very might be not comfortable for compatible for remote work as well. But I believe in the near future, we're going to see homes like 2 bedroom, 2 offices, 1 bedroom, 2 offices, because I see some unbelievable funny things in my Zoom calls that people are in the garage, people are in like working in the bedroom with his wife, 3 kids. Okay, our life is, our homes and our current living structure is not very compatible for most people. We are not very compatible, but I think it will be very compatible very, very soon. And I think this is also what I see in a lot of companies, and we have thousands of companies in remote team. I see in these worst times, people become more open and work together and be close to each other in communities, right? And then this will help sync the diversity and inclusion into work and everyday life. And I think what we see right now because of the pandemic, this is very interesting. I think we are entering in a time that this is very weird. It will sound very weird, but even the democracy is gone. Democracy is not working anymore. What it works, who gives most importance to minorities have wins. So instead of the majority wins, we are totally moving in a time that minority and people who include the most kind of people, most different kind of people will actually win. And we see it many, many times. Like I witnessed this in San Francisco. It's like American Disabled Act, right? Because we want to include people, we don't want to give them uncomfort. So in America, every street and every toilet everywhere needs to be compliant with American Disabled Act, right? So in Silicon Valley, because we have multiple different genders, now I think it's 7 gender, I think, or they are defining the 8th gender. We create our toilets in 6-7 months that become genderless, right? Because there is maybe just 10,000 people, 20,000 people, I don't know the number, just don't, they feel bad in going to men's restroom or women's restroom, right? So the solution is, okay, let's do genderless restrooms, right? And this is for the minority. So we can see first time in the history, maybe, a small group of people can totally change the dynamics of how we are living. And so I start to believe the current democracy model of, okay, if you have more than 51% vote, you are winning, not really actually. Now, even they look like they are winning, but they have to bow down on the minority request, right? And this is changing, and this will just increase and increase and increase. So the companies and the leaders of these communities, and I always look at communities like Six Nomad is the first people who go and looking for gold in California, right? We are really living the future where 99% of the companies are not even remote right now, right? So we are actually be the leaders in 10, 20 years or 5 years. And when people are saying, we moved to fully remote, we said, we were doing remote for a very long time. So I really, I want to actually, I really like the question. So I actually want to go a little bit faster. So I really think this pressure and attention makes giant companies to bring their diversity and inclusion into their A game. So now every CEO, every leader, every person is thinking, okay, how are we going to make our companies more diverse? And the more diverse we do, we have more ideas and we have more creativity, and it will give us a competitive edge. And remote is totally changing that, God bless. So, and I believe this, I'm always a hopeful romantic, not a hopeless romantic. So I definitely believe the world is shifting and changing to a totally better world. Even the times currently looks really bad. People are dying. The government's totally failed. We have a crazy president. It looks really, really bad, but I have so much hope for the future that, so this is what we believe. It's really the time of minorities. And I think race has no importance in any job anymore. Gender has no importance. Color is normal and beautiful. And everyone will have similar color probably in the Zoom in 2 years. Your abilities and talents matter more than your diploma right now. So the whole university system is changing, right? Your appearance, everyone is sitting in Zoom anyway, right? You are fat or slim or keto diet, intermediate diet, doesn't matter anymore. So this is great because now we're just gonna work with each other because we are part of a goal, actually, right? So I also believe that there is a new democracy of remote coming, and we are doing a lot of things. We have an in-house lawyer working on this. So I want to finish this a little bit faster. So it is time to change and become better in leveraging the diversity. And we are doing something very cool, actually. So in remoteteam.com, we are actually adding every company's data, and we have 1.9 million companies. And we're going to show them how many people of color they have, how many females, biological sex, of course, defined female and male they have, right? And we're gonna show the world how we are so in the baby steps of diversity and inclusion, because most companies are still very male dominant or defined male dominant. A lot of companies still hugely white color of people. They don't have a lot of people of color. And I think when you see it as a number, and I'm so happy that I think in US recently, one of the bank CEOs become a female CEO. And in the Fortune 500, there is only 5 Black people, which is unbelievably crazy in my head. At least it should be 20%. So when people see it, how we are not diverse, I really believe it will make people to focus on the diversity more and more and do more when they really see it in front of their eyes that, oh my God, our companies are not diverse. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I hope you guys like it. So.
Yes, Shaheen, do you hear me? So we have missed you for a couple of seconds. And we have question, actually the question was asked to the Sasha, our previous speaker, but the question was, give me a second. Over my years of job experience, I have discovered that many companies who hire remotely don't like hiring people from Africa, especially Nigeria. Why do you think this happens? Secondly, why do you think most remote companies underpay developers from Africa and India?
Yeah, this is, yeah, don't like is not a great word, but you know, probably people who is African don't like to hire some other people, right? So it just probably didn't work for that company, right? So I think when companies are going remote, I believe that they first need to they need to build a strategy. So they have to select a culture and work with the culture, right? If the company is just hiring I have no idea about why Nigeria is different than other countries or why Russia is different than other countries, right? Every culture has pros and cons, right? There's no superior culture or no superior nation, right? Even our crazy president think he's the superior God, but other than him, everyone is equal, right? So it probably didn't work, right? Of course, some cultures have different business ethics than others, but I have engineers who works in Nigeria, great for Silicon Valley companies, right? So you cannot generalize it. And if it didn't work, probably didn't work for that company, right? And underpay is a big thing. I don't believe we live in a world that what people will pay in US prices to someone in India. I don't think the world works like that yet, right? There is something called McDonald's index. This is very funny. So the hamburger price is different in every country. We don't have one currency yet. But I definitely believe, and I see this in remote because people are remoteteam.com, people are paying globally. A Silicon Valley company will pay more than the average in their local country. That's for sure. And I think it's a great start. It's a great start. And I think in maybe 20 years, when we become a more global village, this will increase more and more. But currently, of course, this will be underpaid because you are trying to make someone happy in that location. But this problem is even exists in Silicon Valley, right? God bless, 5 years ago, like the same position, because that person has a different gender, like female people were getting less money. This is crazy in my head. Now, God bless, they made it equal, right? And I think if we are in minus, you have to do a little bit more to go to the middle ground, right? I believe the companies even has to pay more, but I think this will take time. Yeah.
We actually have Karen here. Sorry guys, if you have any questions, please join us and ask them, but I want to introduce Karen. She's a huge HR tech leader from Israel. Hi, Karen. Maybe you want to add some words to the diversity and inclusion thing?
That's very kind of you. Thank you for the presentation. First of all, it was wonderful. I loved it. I love your passion, and we need more people like you. Maybe just a small comment. I was judging in a startup hackathon last week. And everybody was talking about diversity and inclusion. Everybody else was from the States, and I was from Israel, okay? So I'm from the Middle East. It's just like for them, like India, okay? So they were talking about diversity and inclusion, and still I was not acknowledged, I would say, okay? So I think the difference, the distance is still way too big. It's more of a concept. Even some of the companies are not ready for it, but it's good that the conversation is going. It's absolutely ridiculous that we even have to talk about it. But since this is the situation, but it's still, I'm telling you, they're talking about diversity and inclusion and not doing diversity and inclusion to the people right next to them. So it's for them perhaps still an idea, okay? And not something.
It's a cool thing to do. It's a cool thing to talk.
Exactly. I'm feeling this is still in the level of buzzwords, although of course there's so many out there who are doing amazing work for diversity and inclusion. But most of the companies are maybe listening to the talk about it. And as we said, buzzwords. Still a lot more to do, absolutely. And I will say something else.
I really believe it's the 1%. It's really like when you look, I saw a picture, it totally changed my mind. It was a magazine, Fortune magazine cover. And they were showing the small faces of the Fortune 500 companies.
Yeah.
It was 500 pixel, right? Because there's 500. And there's only 4 people who is people of color, right?
Yeah, unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But we don't need to be harsh on humanity, right? The humanity designed like this, the capitalism like designed like this for at least 500 years, right? So
Yeah.
it will take time, but God bless, it's going really accelerated, right? But it will take.
Yeah, sorry, no, I'm sorry if I stepped. We have a little gap in. I just wanted to say that VR, I think, is fixing all of this in a way, okay? Because I don't know if all the people on the call have tried to do remote work on VR, because it's absolutely out of this world, literally. It's amazing. And those applications definitely have the ability to show, I would say, or represent diversity. Okay, so you can choose any kind of avatar, and they really are more open that way. Perhaps it will help.
Yeah, I really believe deep fakes will, like, now this is Zoom, right? It touch up my a little bit experience. My face is not that pretty, so it just makes it a little bit pretty, right? I believe that real avatars is coming, like absolutely real soon. And I think people will go in Zoom, will go to any kind of avatar, and it will look like real in 3 to 4 years. That's for sure. And avatar is really becoming part of our life. And
yes,
I really believe this is a great time for for remote work. It's really great. People, the look is not that important anymore, right? Some people don't even open their Zoom, right? I have some people in my team that I never saw them actually, right? In real, they never open their camera, right? So and I think this Zoom, the new telecom technologies, God bless, Apple decided to put a better camera in their iMacs. They're gonna put a better camera in their MacBooks, and everyone gonna follow that. We're gonna have 3D face scanners like the iPhone. So everyone will wear avatar, right? Everyone will have a more prettier face, whatever they believe pretty is, right? Yeah, and
just to jump in real fast, because I was talking a lot about kind of how these big companies are leading and working across distance. I will tell you, though, from a technology standpoint, a lot of the companies I'm working with, these large enterprises that have been around for 50 years, 75 years, it's even a learning curve to get them to understand how to use the video conferencing, how to turn on the camera. So so depending on what industry you're in, I think that learning curve is going to be a lot faster. You know, I love hearing about the VR and the avatars and all of that, but I'm like thinking about my own clients and being like, what year will it be when when they adopt some of that?
I totally understand what you're saying, but I'll tell you where the difference is, okay? The difference is that VR, all you have to do is put that thing on your head, and you're getting all those things that you lost in remote work, you're getting them back. You're all together in the same space, okay? To be honest, I'm on this call, but I did 5 more things, okay, as I was listening to this call, okay? I had another call. I did other things as well. When you're on VR, you're together in the same room with your team. So this is not the kind of technology like everything like AI and all the other crazy stuff. This is really bringing humans back to being humans, being together in the same room. I think it's going to catch faster than any other technology.
It'll take role modeling. It'll take role modeling. You're going to need people role modeling this and setting expectations that this is the tech we're going to use.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it's, have you tried it, by the way?
I have not tried it in a video conferencing situation, no.
Yeah. So once you have a headset, ping me and we'll do this together and you will be amazed. That's it.
Yeah, but
guys, thank you for the conversation. Sorry, I want just to introduce Sharon here. She's our next speaker. I think she's very like on top of the all diversity and inclusion and Health and Wellness. She's CEO and co-founder of Cassiopeia Tech. Yeah, and we can just continue talking about the same thing and give her a spot to start her presentation. Sorry.
Okay. Hi everyone. I was just jumping into a really interesting discussion. So I think like what you mentioned here is, how we use all these new tools and technologies to help us to improve our virtual work experience is so relevant to what we're gonna talk about next. What I'm gonna share with you is how to use data to lead more effective remote teams. So I was gonna share my screen. I'm gonna just jump in. Perfect. So yeah, so this is what we're going to talk about, but feel free to ask any question and also to, to just interact in the middle. If there is really something that you would like to add or to share, just feel free. So a bit about me. So I was a remote manager for many years, leading very distributed product teams. And my background is in product management. I led very data-driven product before. And another fun fact about me is that I'm a lawyer by training. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cassiopeia. We empower leaders with actionable insights. What we do, we just use communication patterns that are like who sent to whom and when, and to provide actionable insights about how to improve team dynamics, collaboration, work-life wellness within remote teams. So this is a bit about me. And before I'm gonna talk to you about the agenda and the tips that we're gonna talk about, first of all, I would like to mention that 48% of organizations using network analysis is the communication patterns that I just mentioned. That are like who sent to whom and when, no text, no voice, just the metadata itself. So it's a very common and it's a very powerful resource that we all have as companies. Usually the admin got the access to this kind of data. And it's a very powerful resource. So what we're going to talk about is how to use this data that we all have to really improve the way we work together and communicate, or be as a teams, as companies. So this is just a bit of a background. And specifically, this is what we're going to deep dive into. So first of all, we're going to talk about the benefits of remote work, just really briefly, challenges, and then we're going to talk a lot about the tips, really practical tips that we can share from our experience, how we use data as a company and how you can do it with your companies as well, and what to measure, and some takeaways that we're going to finish with. So yeah, so we're going to start. The benefits of remote work. So what we see and we all experience is that remote work really has tons of really benefits. We can see that employees can be happier. There is a larger talent pool, people more productive, the office costs are lower, and better employees retention also. So there is tons of new benefits, but also there is also some downsides or some challenges that we experience as well. So lately, Harvard Business Review published a study that shows that 79% of managers don't feel confident leading remote teams. And the reason for that is really clear. I can share from my experience when I'm talking to remote managers. They all really share, describe the same thing in different words, which is basically as a remote manager, you're just working with a smaller data set. So you don't have all these small data points you used to have in the office. You don't see how people engage. You don't see who are they drinking coffee with, or if they're smiling during the day. You just don't see that anymore. So basically there is a gap that is created by the shift to remote work. And what we do at Cassiopeia, we are using data to help managers to close that gap by providing them visibility into team dynamics and to spot issues in a timely manner. So this is a bit about the challenges. So you can see there is more challenges with relationships, with difficulties with communication, employee visibility, all the things I think we all experience these days. This is a bit about the challenges and how data can really help us to overcome some of them. So we're gonna just jump in and we're gonna talk about a few things that we can use data to help us with. And the first thing is engagement. And why engagement level is important for many reasons. So as you can see here, business units really, according, and this is one of the studies, but there are many. The business units in the top quartile of engagement experience all these amazing benefits that you can see here. And of, you can see that people with higher engagement get lower absenteeism or productivity, sales are higher, profitability. So this is a bit about, why it's really important, engagement level of employees, how well employees feel connected and really care about the company, the vision, what we are doing in our day-to-day. So this is a bit about engagement. And how we can use data to measure engagement and understand when we have some problems with engagement, that people feel less connected and less engaged. So it's a pretty complex measurement that we are using. There are few just factors that I mentioned here that can help you really to calculate and measure engagement. So this is just a few of them. The first one is employees' activity in public channels. If you feel comfortable really to express yourself in public channels. The second one is also to communicate in channels with high amount of participants as well, if I feel comfortable doing that. The third is the percentage of participators in ad hoc meeting versus recurring meeting. So think about it. If I'm just attending another weekly or daily meeting, instead of I'm setting up meetings because I need them, I need that to get the job done right now and to fix some problems and some issues, I'm much more engaged with what I do instead of, just taking another weekly meeting. So this is the third one. And another one here you can see is this time you spend in really with skip level leadership. So what research shows is that as employees, you will be much more engaged if you're spending time with higher managers, higher level managers. And the reason for that is there is two main reasons. The first one is that you will feel more connected to what the company is doing, our vision, why we're doing what we're doing. And secondly, you will feel more appreciated. So that the higher level manager really spend time with you and want to get to know you. So this is also a good metric to take into account. And lastly, the number of strong and weak tie connections. What research shows is in order to really maximize the engagement level, employees need to have strong connection, usually with their team, with their internal team, but also weaker connections with people in other departments, in other teams. This way, people feel more connected to what the company is doing because they have wider perspective about, what we are doing and why we're doing what we are doing. So this is a few ways to just use data to improve our engagement level and to measure it. So this is just the first one that I wanted to share with you. The second thing we're going to talk about is collaboration. And I can share that while shifting to remote work, what I hear a lot from my customers is that there is a lot of collaboration issues. And the reason for that is that when we were working in the office, we have all these small encountering, we are encountering someone in the hallways on the way to the coffee machine, and we are just chatting, what each and everyone is doing, what we're working on, some problems that we have. But we don't have that anymore while shifting to remote work. So we need to be much more intentional about our communication, how we create this small collaboration and communication moment. So I can share just an example about how to use data to really early detect when there is some collaboration issues between two teams. So I can share, you can see here just an example from one of our reports, 38% decrease in communication between two teams. So we are looking on the trend, the communication and collaboration between two teams over time. And we noticed that, just in the last few weeks, there is a significant drop in communication. So what we highlight that for managers, we also add in some recommended actions about what they can do about it, how to improve synchronization between the two teams. But this is just an example about how you can use data to really early detect collaboration issues, which is really important and really affect our performance. The second thing here is, and I get a sense that you all experience that when you're working remotely, you're using much more written communication, because in many cases, we are working in different time zones and our schedule is more flexible, and we need to use written communication for asynchronous collaboration as well. So what I wanted to share with you here is just a few methods to how to really create updates, written updates, to keep everyone aligned with what we are doing in a very visual way. So this is just a few examples that I like. One of the methods that our customers are using is using just the Slack updates, but in a very visual way. So you can see here, there is a system that every team is just using it a bit differently. But for example, here you can see that Rose is for success, Cactus is for challenge, and Rocket Ship is for the things we're looking forward to. And this really creates this ability to just have a quick view and see where we stand and what's our problem. So this is a really good example, I think, about how to use written communication for really great updates and to improve the way we communicate and make sure that everyone's aligned. And what we use also when measuring things and measuring the way we communicate, what we usually see is that as teams getting used to also working more remotely, the written communication increases compared to the verbal communication that we have. And this is totally makes sense and very natural process. Yeah, and then this is just a brief about, what we should measure. Actually, when we are shifting to remote work or when we are working remotely and we want to improve it, what we should measure, right? So we talked about a few examples, but this is just more, I think, cohesive kind of way for me to just add a few more things that you can easily measure. So the first one here is about engagement that we mentioned, but what is important to measure, it's also engagement per department level, per teams, per region, and so forth. The second one here is about how we communicate. So there is a lot of things you can do to optimize your communication using data. I can share from, for example, one use case for one of our customers. What we saw for them is that we had one team in this company that were constantly complaining about that the communication for this team is not working that well. They were experiencing that they're writing things or sharing some really important notes, but no one really engaged with these notes or these messages. No one really see them, and people were complaining about lack of transparency. And this team is like, what they are talking about. We are communicating everything. Wow, what they're talking about at all. So what we saw just from using Cassiopeia is that on Slack, on the public Slack channels, this team were communicating between, I think it was 7 to 8 a.m. And the rest of the company were most active and on Slack between 10 to 11. So they were kind of not synchronized, not correlated their activity to the rest of the company. And when shifting their important message just to post them on the most active hours when people are more engaged, it really helps them to optimize their communication with the rest of the company. So people were much more engaged with their messages and what they wanted to communicate for. So this is just an example about how you use data. So have a look on the different channels you're using. What kind of channels are more effective for you to communicate at the different times that are the best for you to communicate things. As I mentioned, the written communication versus spoken, time we spent on meetings and socializing and so forth. And the next one here is collaboration. So we mentioned as well how we communicate between different units, different teams, different departments. So this is another thing that it's worth considering. Work-life balance, everything that relates to work-day balance is really challenging for remote teams. So what we hear as well from our customers is when people start to work remotely, what's happening in many cases that people just set up too many meetings, too many calls, creating a lot of stress and work overload because they don't really have any time left to work on their personal tasks. So this is a really big issue, and what you can do using data is really try to optimize your meeting time, how much time we're spending on meetings, with how many participants, who's attending the meeting, how much time we actually need for each meeting. Maybe, you know, we are finishing meeting earlier. Maybe we should set up just shorter time for meeting to optimize our schedule and so forth. So there is a lot of things we can do to really optimize a work-day balance, work-life balance. Another example I can share that what we do at Cassiopeia, we also provide insights when teams are working more over the weekend or nighttime, and when there is increase in work overload. This way, really managers can really pay attention when there is some work-life balance issues. We can notice this on time. So you definitely can do that using data. Work experience for different employees and subgroup. This is really crucial. You talked about diversity and inclusion. Using data is a great way to improve the way, also diversity, but also inclusion. I can share, so different subgroups that I mentioned here, it could be gender-based, parents, new employees. I can share one use case from one of our customers. What we saw is that the women within this company communicating 30% less on Slack public channels. And when there is a senior manager within this channel, they're communicating 60% less. So this is really important insight, and this is really what we highlight, this kind of insights, and also share with them, okay, this is something that we see. This is the questions you can raise talking to the females employees that in the specific teams where it's the most severe behavior, and just open this dialogue with them. Ask them, you know, what will help them to feel more comfortable communicating, or if they feel comfortable also to collaborate or to communicate within a public or a large forum within the company, what can help them to feel more comfortable doing that. So this is a great way to also just track this, also the non-inclusive behavior or that we have within our company, all these blind spots. And productivity, you can definitely use data to measure and improve productivity, how many, you know, code deployed, tickets, how many calls we have. Every company, every team got different measures for that. So this is another thing we can use. Yeah, so just a few notes about when using data, few things you need to consider. The first one is the time frame that we want to have a look at. So I can share that we at Cassiopeia, we're looking on trends. So to have a look on the few months before and 1 week before, and have a look on different trends. A lot of companies also using, for example, they want to see their activity, how it was changed before and after the shift to remote work. So this is also something you can have a look at. So think about the time frame, the segment, so different units and subgroups. This is the most interesting insights where you can find them. Just have a look, not only on the company level, but you know, also on the department level, or on team level, different subgroup level. This is really interesting. And lastly is being very responsible for our employee privacy. And we need to be very intentional about how we use data, because it's very powerful, but we also want to make sure that people feel comfortable sharing their data and about what we are doing with the data. So I can share that what we do at Cassiopeia, we are providing insights on the manager communication, and the rest of the insights is on a team level or a subgroup level. So we will never show any insights about specific individuals. We won't show Diana is not talking that much with Mark this week, nothing like that. So this is our way to really help people feel comfortable, sharing their data. And also it's really important to share with them the value that they're getting from sharing the data, what they get out of it, right? So this is the one thing that is really important to also take into account. That's it. So some key takeaways here. The first thing is to be aware of the power of data and how we can use it. And I think this is really something that what we are talking about here is just the first step. And the second one is to just have a look on the signals that I mentioned. How are we communicating on Slack? How much? How frequent? People now, one of our employees are not communicating that much. What does that mean? So be more intentional and pay more attention for that. And then set processes. As we mentioned, we need to be much more intentional about the way we communicate and collaborate. So set the right processes that can help you to do that and create this creative environment, collaborative environment that you have also from working remotely, and then use the tools that can help you to do that. That's it. Yeah, so I'm Shiran, I'm the CEO of Cassiopeia. If you have any questions about how to use data to lead more effective remote teams, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Shiran Yaroslavsky, or my email, shiran@cassiopeia.tech. Would love to chat with you about data. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Shiran. Please, everyone who is listening to the presentation, can you please turn on the videos? It's really difficult when you talk and you don't see faces. Please do. Shiran, I have a tough question for you. So actually, why do I need to track communication? So we're not a big team. We're like the team of 12 people, and we work remotely and asynchronously. So actually, I don't care how often people communicate. I just care about how they perform, how they accomplish the challenges, but not how much they talk. So, and we don't talk a lot using video calls, and we don't talk a lot at Slack. There is a lot of personal communication. I don't see, actually, just for me, why should I need to track something? What for?
Yeah, that was a good question. So I think the way we communicate and work and collaborate really affect our performance. And if we would be able to track issues in the way we communicate and collaborate, we can also help our performance to be better. So I can share, for example, if let's say you're a larger company, but you're onboarding new employees, and onboarding new employees remotely is extremely challenging. And you can see that using data, these new employees are not as connected or engaged after time, compared to their teammates. This is a problem. And most cases, people won't be aware of it because we're all working remotely. We'll have tons of work to do. But these employees are not well connected to the rest of the company. And if you're not catching it over time, it will affect their performance. So this is something that if it's happening, we can alert just by using data. So it will help you to track this kind of issues in a timely manner and not when things explode. Not when the performance is really bad. It just allows you to track these small issues in much earlier.
I understand, but it's actually quite different approach what we have. So if the person is not connected to the other team members in a 1 or 2 weeks period, I will see that the performance of that person is quite low because there is no tasks which can be performed just by one person. So you can see that the performance level. Why do I need to track communication? I can track the performance.
Yeah, so in many cases, I think just tracking the performance is not enough. You will notice the performance decreases way after things started. And also I think it's much more challenging in larger companies. Perhaps now, when you're a small team, you feel like, okay, how is it doing with this guy and this lady, and that's fine. But as you grow, and we work a lot with companies that are growing remotely, it's really much more challenging to do that.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions or comments, or maybe experiences? And do you think should we track the data like in a remote teams, or is it crucial to track data, like just opinions?
Nobody else wants to speak. Talking.
Hey.
About what you said before. I've been noticing too, working remotely, the difference from working remotely and then working with a team in the office. There is, I feel like a social disconnect because, you know, working with a team, it's more about just getting the work done. You know, it's also about having a team and also in a way being like social in a way too. So, I mean, yeah, and it could go both ways. I mean, I feel like people get to the point remotely quicker in a way. A lot of work can get done, but as I work remotely more, I realize like the previous talker said about, I feel like it's the most optimal situation would be hybrid. I know not everybody's in the same situation as me, but my situation is more like I work with people around the world, but I don't really work with a team in person. So I feel like, yeah, the communication thing, I don't know about, yeah, I'm not, well, yeah, what she said before about bigger companies, about tracking the data, about how people are communicating. I think that could be a good indicator of how good the team is communicating. So I feel like, yeah, in the same way, in other ways inside of an office environment, I feel like things can get done quicker because if you're in the same room with people, sometimes something could be just said very quickly. You just go over to their machine and say, oh, this or that. But then in my situation, as you said, a lot of people don't like to even go on video calls or even just calls. I have to, you know, get out the, make a screenshot, highlight this, highlight that. This is what you, and it's caused me a lot of more work. Yeah, it's like there's like a plus and minus to the way we work. I think overall it's great, but yeah, I think there has to be like a meeting ground in between. It's quite like disconnected, and it could be good and bad is what I'm saying. I guess that's my comment about that, about what you said before, about how, yeah, let's just get to business and get the work done, and it's just all about performance. It's true. That's very true, right? If we're trying to get like good work done, but I feel like, you know, what's missing in the remote, at least with my what I do, is that kind of social kind of, you know, just it doesn't have to be about work, but just communicating about, you know, I don't know, it could be about anything, like the newest technologies. What are you doing? What are you using? What do you like to do for fun? You know, I think it could go beyond with what you're working on. So I think that's what's missing in at least in my remote work life is like that back and forth and communication. So.
I totally agree. And I think, you know, the way we design our work environment and our work experience is much more than just performance. We need to grow a very really a great culture and a great company. We need to make sure the way we communicate and collaborate is going really well, and we manage to overcome the different challenges in a dynamic atmosphere that I think we all now are working at. So yeah, this is just, you know, some thoughts that I thought will be useful for you about some tips about how to use data for your companies. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much. I need to jump to.
Am I able to chime in, or what's the flow here?
Sorry, say it again, Raj. Do you want to
Oh,
ask
I
a
was just
question?
asking if I could chime in, but it looks like Sharon disappeared.
Yeah, I believe we have missed her.
Her internet probably died. I don't think she left intentionally.
I was just going to say that I don't think all teams are returning from the post-COVID fully distributed experience in the same way. I think a large chunk of teams are returning into some sort of hybrid model and are leaning heavily on sync workflows, particularly those companies, organizations that were previously in an office. They're all within similar time zones. This is kind of a new configuration that we haven't seen before. It's not like pre-COVID where people are fully distributed on day one or partially distributed. This is people who are all in an office, pre-existing trust, all within a similar time zone. And so I think you're going to see a lot of synchronous discussion. Like, I'm not saying asynchronous is not key, but I think there is a distinction between pre-COVID teams and post-COVID teams. A lot of these post-COVID teams are not very globally distributed. They're in the same time zone. They're just geographically distributed with, let's say, within the Bay Area. In that kind of model, if they're still heavily leaning on sync, I think it is important to track communications, activity, connectedness, all of that sort of stuff in terms of building team camaraderie and productivity. So I was sort of evangelizing for sure on there, but I guess we lost her.
I WhatsApped her, but she's not answering, so she must have a problem.
Yes.
I think we can get to the other speaker. Yeah, sorry. Do you hear me well?
Yes, well now.
Yeah, my internet connection is not so good either. So I want to introduce you to our next speaker. It's Christine, and she's a tech leader. She's a healthcare expert, also CEO and founder of Butler Health. And we're going to talk about the mental health in distributed and remote teams and mental health of working from home. Christine, you can make a short intro of yourself. I think you're mute, so.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, that's better.
Thanks for having me. I'm a 3 times founder, a software engineer, and this is my 3rd company that I've built. What we're doing is we're building a marketplace that matches people with highly vetted therapists. And so basically trying to solve the problem of inaccessibility to high quality therapy and mental health across the globe.
Thank you. I want to say that this time we won't have any presentation, if I'm not mistaken. So we're going to just put it that way. I'm going to ask some questions. If anyone has a question for Christine, you can also jump in and ask it right away. But we can start with like defining something. So the topic of our talk today with Christine is mental health of working from home. And I just wanted to ask you if we are talking about the problems of working from home or the remote work in general, because these things can be a little bit different these days.
Well, I don't know that it's just has to be one definition. I think what's happened is, there are teams that pre-COVID were distributed and may have been remote just in a local geographic area or distributed across the globe. My company happens to be one of those companies. But then post-COVID, I think, and during COVID, what we're seeing is there is such a mandate to now not be able to obviously go to work for many different reasons. So I don't know that it's necessarily, I guess, about just working remotely, really. I think the way we're working right now is not the way you typically work remotely either. This is not the way it used to be. You had quiet spaces. You might have gone in somewhere to work, for a period of time, like a WeWork or a co-working space. Your kids went to school. Your partner probably went to work. The 2 of you probably weren't working from home. So the aspects of what's, sort of overtaking our emotional health right now is, I think, heavy on both ends. And it's just a matter of having to adapt to this new way of working.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with you on this one. If you talk about the mental health, do you think the remote work is more of a challenge or a bonus? So what do you think are the downsides and the best things about the remote work?
I think that right now it's really hard to have positive emotional and mental health when you're working from home. And the reason is the world's pretty much on fire. right? And we all are witnessing that. So what I'm finding from different teams is it's really hard to focus for most of us. It's hard for us not to be worried about something. Even in companies that are larger, let's say, and that have moved to a distributed form until, for a certain amount of time or for a longer period of time, I mean, people are still worried about a lot of things. It's not the way it used to be. So today you're worried about, okay, is my kid going to school? Is he not going to school? Are schools open? How do I balance teaching my child right now? Like, who are they going to play with? I have to work. I've got a lot going on. Or there's a lot of people that are also dealing with, sort of this feeling defeated because you're not feeling maybe as productive as you normally do. And typically when we're not living up to social norms that are expected of us, like, you can be on social media and see that, people are killing it. They're using all these tools, are being very effective, and that may not be the case for everyone, which is actually kind of rare for that to be the case right now. So I find that people are beating themselves up a bit more than they should. They're hard on themselves right now because they're maybe not doing or feeling as motivated as they used to all the time, which used to be a thing. I think though that when you take out COVID, there are a lot of benefits to working remotely. So many benefits for a company, for leaders, for people who work there. You tend to find more balance in your workday. Commutes are cut, obviously, but the piece that I don't think we get away from is the loneliness. It's really hard to make human connections when you work remotely. And then on top of that, right now, during COVID, it's even harder, especially if you're in an area that you're not really able to see people. And so I think there are benefits to it, of course. But I think right now, I guess I would just want to reiterate to people, this is not work from home typical. This is not the way it goes. This is an anomaly. There's usually a lot more rhyme and reason and balance to it. And right now, it's a very difficult time for anyone working from home or in the office, frankly.
Can you tell us like the most common practice or techniques that people can use to help themselves with all these challenges they're meeting right now?
Yeah, I would say it depends on what kind of role you're in. But one thing I would say is that being really open about what you're going through and feeling is like the first thing, like just acknowledging it, right? I'm noticing my one-on-ones. I have staff all across the globe, but my one-on-ones are different than they've ever been. Now it's me really talking about security and instilling confidence in them that we're not going to lay anyone off. The company's doing fine. All these, I know the world is upside down, but, I need to also listen to what's going on in their part of the world, which is different, right? So I think being open and talking about that, first of all, is really important. I think people need to know who they're working with and how that's the only way we're connecting. So being open about that. Another thing I would say, which is, probably super controversial to tech hubs, but like laying off of social media right now is really important. Giving yourself time to breathe is another piece of it. I think what we're seeing the most of across the world right now is depression and anxiety. There's no doubt about it, right? It is just overtaking everyone. That the stigma of, I don't have a emotional concern or mental concern is gone because all of us share that now. And so just being kinder to yourself, frankly, which is something that I think most of us have a hard time doing, but acknowledging that you don't have to be 100% every day. My team right now is, there are some days, I build high growth companies. I'm known for that. And it's a different way to work right now. I can't expect that of my team right now. That's impossible. I can expect them to do their best and give them a really great environment to be able to think, but there's a lot of days where somebody might just be like, I just can't get my head in this. And that's okay. Take the day off, go relax somewhere and then come back the next day. So I think it goes back to just acknowledging, what are you feeling, and being able to request it if you're fortunate enough, like I need time off, or just give yourself time off as well.
That's actually a great message. Just be kinder to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself because of the whole situation here. I think it's like it's a very good message for everyone here. I know that a lot of people are using some kind of ritual for the work from home situation. For example, they dress up office style, or they just do some walks in the morning and return home to start working again. What do you think about it? Does that really work? Or maybe do you have any experience of like testing these things out?
Yeah, so for me personally, I mean, I feel like I'm really lucky that I have a separate place in my house to work. Not everyone has that, right? So that's like, it feels like I'm going to work. I walk outside into my garage, right? And it looks like this. So it's, I'm very lucky. Not everybody has that, right? I also don't have little kids anymore. My kids are in college now. So that's the other part of it. But I do get up and, I try to keep to as much of what I used to do. So working out is really important right now, in whatever form that is, some kind of exercise. I also make sure that I take more breaks during the day. I feel like right now, longer periods of time of just intense Zoom or, working on your own too, it starts to get to you. And so I need many more, breaks of just taking a walk or going outside or just sitting for a minute. That's pretty much sometimes when I just scroll through something happy like Pinterest, because there's, no pressure in Pinterest, right? It's like the easiest thing to scroll through. But I think you have to find what works for you, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's not the same for everyone. And I think that, it really does go back to being kind to yourself, but also listening to what is it that I need? I've got team members who have just changed a lot of their working hours, which I think is great. I think they're listening to, I don't want to work early in the morning. You shouldn't, I want to work 4 days instead of 5 days. Then that's what you should do, right? I tend to now take Thursdays and Fridays off. That works well for me. It just, instead of, Monday through Friday, there's something about those 2 days that it's during the week. It feels a little bit like I'm sneaking out of work, and there's something about it that just feels a little bit more like I'm decompressing better. So I just think we all have to find what is our rhythm. What is it that we need that makes us as productive as you can be? And then saying to yourself, this is the best I can be right now. This will pass and I will go back to who I am.
That's great. And now a lot of companies are just starting the remote work, or just immediately transferring to it. Can you say that there is any adaptation period, and what is the best way to help employees during this period? What can we do as founders, as leaders, to help them?
I think the first thing is really giving people realistic expectations. When you hire somebody new that is going to be remote, I think you have to be even more intentional and deliberate about onboarding and making them feel like they're a part of the team. It can't be an afterthought. It can't be sort of done like we do it a little bit well. It's got to be really well done. And you should treat it like a sales process, especially now. So if we hire somebody, usually they don't start work for a month, maybe a month and a half. It's very typical, right? For that month and a half, they start our drip campaign. And so they start to get emails from us with different things in it. First one might be like, hey, welcome to the team. Here's what to expect your first day. Maybe, a week later, they'll get something else on like, hey, fill out this form. This is how we'll run payroll. Hey, meet the team. Here's somebody that you can connect with ahead of time to ask questions. So we do that to keep people engaged, but also to sort of start to give you information of how our company works, how our team works, start to get to know the business, because really intimidating to start on day one when either no one's on your time zone or everyone's like crickets on Slack, which tends to happen in a lot of tech companies when people are heads down working, right? If there's not a whole lot of activity sometimes on Slack because of that, and you're new, breaking in can be incredibly intimidating. So I think that's really important. I also think that setting up in the beginning as well, we do something where for the first week, whatever time zone they're in, I'll figure out I have to meet with them first, whether they report to me or not, and I meet with them for a week. And the first thing is, the reason for that is that would be, if you add up 5 days of an hour of a video call together, just you and I, any questions on what you learned, anything on what you're talking about, let me tell you more about the mission, let me tell you about what that does is it actually is really weird, but 5 days on a Zoom 1 hour meeting is equivalent to 2 lunches in person. And if you think about that ratio and you're trying to make a connection with someone, how many one-on-ones then do you have to have in the beginning to make this person feel like they can approach you? Because that's another thing that's really important right now. We're all behind a screen. So how do you build enough trust that someone's going to go forward and be able to bring things up to you, right? So there's a lot that you've got to do, I think, to go above and beyond to make team members really feel like this is their company. We're so excited you're here, and you're here because you're one of the smartest people we've ever met, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's actually right. And I know that you're also a startup mentor. So you're mentoring founders also in Techstars and maybe someplace else. Is it like, what's the most common question or issue they ask you during these sessions?
So I'm a mentor and I'm also a coach to CEOs. And I would say that the number one thing is either the founder is looking for help on, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help my team. And I would say that's like hands down the biggest thing. Is there an app to give someone? No, there isn't. You have to talk to people. There's no easy way. There's no shortcut. I've seen some people say, well, maybe I'll just give them Headspace. No, you have to still get on the phone and talk to people. It's such a different time that I think we sometimes might think remote work just equals Slack, and that's not remote work. Remote work just means you have freedom around where you live and your schedule. And you're not going to, hopefully, if you're doing it right, be distracted by silliness all day long, that you have to answer questions right on the spot. You can maybe be more thoughtful about how you're answering questions and getting to people. But I would say a lot of leaders are incredibly worried about this right now. They don't know how to help their teams. It's just such a new way of working.
Karen, I heard some some thoughts from you. Maybe you want to jump in and comment on something?
Well, no, first of all, it was really a pleasure to hear you speak like that. I wish more people would share those ideas. No, I don't have much to add. Just that I'm really into VR now. Really, I'm sorry. I just see it just the greatest solution out there to all those problems. It's fun. It's engaging. It's together. You're focused. It's everything. So I'm just listening to everybody talking, and I'm saying there's a solution for all of this. Okay, it'll bring up morale. I agree. People are depressed. People are anxious. I really, nobody's paying me to say this. I just tried it. I bought myself a pair of VR and I tried all those apps, and it's just amazing, really. So, I don't know, maybe try it yourself, and maybe you can start I would say recommend that to the CEOs that you're talking with. This is, it's a few $100s to buy a VR headset. There's off-the-shelves applications, and there's solutions to all the problems that you've just raised. So That's what I have to say, basically. I cannot dwell on all those problems right now because I see the solution out there. But I understand the tech fatigue people have. But my role as an HR tech evangelist is to always talk about what's out there and, you know, wait for those open minds to be brave and to start using them. VR is gonna explode big time. No reason why not to start using it now. It's gonna be great solutions for the company's culture, biases, working remote, so much fun, really. So much fun and productivity, collaboration, everything is out there already as a solution. Voila, I said my piece.
Karen, I already want to buy VR. What kind of VR should we buy, and what do you mean? Okay, I will be in a VR since morning, so should I work with my team the whole day in the VR, and we will...
Not the whole day. No. No, absolutely not. Not the whole day. VR today, although the Oculus Quest that just is coming out is much lighter. I need to remind everybody, this is like a PC on your head right now, okay? So it's tiring and it has some kind of weight, okay? You need to get used to it. But you can be, what you will be able to accomplish in 30 minutes, everybody together, even in an hour or so, it's doable. It's amazing. The avatars look like us many times. It's actually streaming me. It's amazing. Is it at the beginning, at the inception of the work environment? Absolutely. But this is the time to jump in and try all those things. It's not expensive. It's fun. And you are absolutely able to collaborate with your distributed teams, whiteboards, everything. I mean it. I had the time of my life. It's just absolutely amazing. Really?
So it's Oculus or something like that. So it's
yeah. I'm not. You know, I don't want to promote Oculus Quest because I don't like Facebook that much. The way they are being such a conglomerate, and but the Oculus Quest is amazing. It's Wi-Fi. You're not connected, tethered to your PC. You can walk around the room with it and just. I said something to a friend of mine. My body was sitting here in Tel Aviv, but my head was having a team collaboration with people from all parts of the world. Okay, and so it's like a little bit schizophrenic. Okay, because my body's here and my mind is in a room with other people, with my team.
So you mean VR will recreate like office experience, but you can be in the same place, and it will solve all the issues with the remote work.
It's an experience, okay? It's not like me looking at the screen right now. I'm in the same room with you. It's an immersive. Sorry?
But one thing I would say, Karen, is that although I agree that it sounds like really great technology to make the reenactment of being in person, what I don't think it can do, though, is to, especially for parents that have children at home, to figure out how, VR is not going to make them magically disappear into another world where you don't have to watch them manage work at the same time.
Oh,
and that's
no, of course.
That's the problem, really. I think. Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that we're having with working from home right now is that it's not typical work from home. Is that you're run really thin. You don't have boundaries between when work starts and work ends, and that's really difficult.
No.
I mean, for me, yeah. I'm a CEO. And I've been a CEO many times before, and typically somebody who I've never faced depression until COVID. And so it's been like this low grade depression where there's some days I wake up and I'm like, does this matter in the world right now? Should
yes,
I do
I'm totally
important. And I just think that, yeah, and I just think that we have to figure out as a society how to give people much more talk to them a lot more about knowing that these are real problems, and there's not a magic pill for it. There really isn't. I wish I could come in here and say there's a magic solution for how to get your work balance in line with all the family things you have going on, and but there isn't one right now, because we're also in a world pandemic. And so it's where I kind of go back to, we have to figure out a way as leaders to be able to talk to our teams about this very openly. This is what's happening right now across the world. You're not alone. You're not a bad employee. You're not less than good. You're not anything different from the reasons we hired you because you're feeling this. This is just a very difficult time right now, and being much more flexible with how and when people work. I also think, being kinder about meetings. Like, I don't think we need to be on Zoom calls for every stupid thing we all need to voice out. You know what I mean? I just think we don't have time for that, because we're trying to balance our life at the same time from some corner in our bedroom or living room. We need to be much more conscientious and responsible of how we're using people's time right now, and allowing people more time and more freedom to be able to say, maybe the best time I can work, frankly, is when my kids are in bed at 9 p.m. And that's when I can focus, and that's when I can work for a minute. And I'm not going to be available from 7 a.m. to 1 p.m. I'm sorry. Like, I've got to teach my kids school and feed them, and make sure they don't remember this time as never seeing their parent, right? Or seeing their parent stressed all the time, which is awful as well. So I just think there's this other part to working right now remotely as an adult right now that has really flipped our lives upside down. And so acknowledging the anxiety, acknowledging that there's more stress than usual. I'm a big advocate of mindfulness, to just be centered and try to get some time for yourself. I'm a big advocate of coaching and mentoring and peer groups, to not always have to learn something, but to be able to talk openly and just vent for a minute. Just have someone listen to you and know you're not the only one going through something. So I just think those things are super important to acknowledge, because I know we do a lot of focus right now, and I'm an angel investor as well. And a lot of the deal flow I get is like, here's another tool on what's going to make remote work better. And I just keep thinking to myself, I think that's great, but help me figure out how this helps us right now when, all the teams I'm talking to are falling apart for good reasons, right? So I'm trying to figure out that connection there on what can we do that really helps people. But I completely get what you're saying about the VR giving you that experience of an office. And I think that is something we should start thinking about when this gets over a little bit more.
No, it's a little bit, first of all, I'm at 100% with you in everything that you've said. Okay. I'm not contradicting it. It's a whole narrative that we're all dealing with. There's no, I'm not even going to try to contradict what you're saying. It's absolutely what it is. But VR is not just another tool. That's what I want to try to say to you. Okay. And I think that part of that narrative, part of those issues that you were mentioning can be dealt with when we're speaking to each other, but on VR, okay? And we're sitting in front of each other, still seeing each other, but we feel like we're together. That has a lot of weight to it, okay? And I'm sure that if you try that, and if you want to try it with me, I'll be more than happy to do it. And you'll see also the fun element of it, which, listen, I too was a little bit depressed here and there, and it just gave me life. Okay. So yeah, it does. I do think it does address some of the narrative that you were talking about. It's not just another tech. I will not agree to that, because as an HR tech evangelist, I can tell you, I've been dealing with so much tech. This is not one of them. This is something else. And it'll take time until people will understand that. I hope very shortly, because it really is, you'll see, it'll help so much.
Karen, thank you. We have to say also our thanks to Christine. Thank you.
I have to go. Thank you. It was an amazing talk.
Yeah, and we also have John here, our next speaker. He's actually an investor from Costano Ventures. And yeah, we can just start with discussing some VR tech products here, as we've been talking about it so much today. We can
John, yes. Hi, John.
Thanks for having
here?
me, Kasinda. Hey, Dan, how are you?
Perfect. How are you?
Yeah.
So you just joined. So what we have here? So we have people in Zoom, like participants here. They can turn on the camera and just ask any questions they want. We have Christine here, the previous speaker. She told us how to stay productive and stay healthy in a remote work. And we're moving from like employee perspective, how to work remotely, to a founder entrepreneur perspective, how to work remotely. And there is a huge like conversation, like Karen is saying that VR will change how we actually communicate to each other and how we change. And that is my first question here. Do you see any like startups on the scene which are exploring VR in a remote work? And do you see potential actually with VR in a remote work?
Yeah, it's a super interesting topic, and I'm sorry that I wasn't here for more of the conversation. I had a board meeting this morning. I think it's a fascinating topic, and I should be honest and say I haven't spent a bunch of time looking at virtual reality solutions post-COVID, and I should, because I think there is a lot of power there, and I totally echo something Karen said, which is if you haven't tried it, just find a way to go try it, because it is a really kind of need to experience it to appreciate it. And I think, you know, from an investor perspective, like it should be said, VR has been something that has been hyped for a long time, and there's always been really interesting tech there. And I'd say adoption has lagged where people thought it would be. I think it's fair to say. It's not to say it's not going to happen. I think it's a classic example of people you know, overestimating what happens in 5 years and maybe underestimating what happens in 15 years. And I think there have been a lot of theories about what the inflection point would be in virtual reality that would trigger adoption. And I think a lot of people felt like it was a price performance threshold of like, once you get a, you know, non-tethered headset at $300 that has this frame rate, adoption will take off. And we've sort of hit a lot of those theorized milestones without adoption taking off. But I'll throw out, without having spent a ton of time thinking about it, that I think COVID could be that inflection point that triggers a lot of adoption, because we're obviously all in a world where it's very hard to get together in person, and virtual reality does replicate a lot of the benefits of that. So it'll be fascinating, and I'll own that I should probably go spend some more time there than I have been recently.
That's cool. John, maybe you can tell us about a little bit more about other projects that are trending now. I'm sure during this like COVID, post-COVID times, there are lots of startups that are focusing on remote work and stuff like that. How to understand what they work for? How to understand what would you like to invest to or not? Yeah,
I think even pre-COVID, collaboration has been a hot topic in venture for a long time. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. Distributed teams were already growing in popularity pre-COVID, but also I think if you look at a lot of popular enterprise software, it's not really designed to be very collaborative. And so if you take an example of like note-taking, right, where historically all of these different note-taking products have been fairly single player, and then you bring a product like Notion into the equation, which is really collaborative and really intended to be worked on across teams. Make a similar analogy to like Excel is very single player, and then you enter Airtable, which is intended to be very collaborative. So I think that's been a hot topic for years, and I think it's just going to get even massively accelerated by COVID. And I think we're looking at all categories of enterprise software and thinking like, how can you take single player experiences and make them multiplayer? I think specifically in COVID, obviously, like the company that maybe has been the single biggest beneficiary is Zoom. And I think what we're seeing now is a lot of people attacking Zoom where, look, it's a really great product. We're using it right now for a reason, but it's a very horizontal product. And as we think about different types of collaboration, and as you look at basically the primitives that make it easier to embed high quality video streaming, you look at like WebRTC, which is an open source project that is basically the backbone of Hangouts getting more and more robust. The idea that everyone needs to be using the same video product, whether you're talking one-on-one or whether you're doing a feedback session or whether you're doing a product jam session or whether you're doing a conference like this, starts to feel, I think, a little crazy. And I think what we'll see is a lot of kind of purpose-built video collaboration products that use open source WebRTC and layer in workflows, layer in integrations to different software products that you might be using, are designed to more naturally fit whatever the engagement is, right? And so we're seeing a lot of really cool stuff there, and I'm super excited about that, both in the infrastructure layer, making it easier to embed WebRTC. So you look at companies like Daily.co, as well as at the application layer that are embedding web streaming and then building products that are built for conferences or built for one-on-ones or built for product brainstorming sessions. I'm really excited about that as well. But I think, zooming out, last point I'll make is like every product category has gotten, I think, disrupted in a really exciting way by COVID. And so whether it be, product, like we have companies in our portfolio that are in e-commerce that are getting, massively accelerated, and people are rethinking what needs to be embedded in those platforms. There's so much opportunity now that I could probably talk for 2 hours straight about different things we're seeing. So I'll pause there.
Okay, thank you. We just skipped your introduction, so maybe a few words about yourself and Costano Ventures.
Yeah, I'm a partner at Costano Ventures. We're a seed and Series A enterprise technology focused venture capital firm. So everything we do is early stage, and everything we do is enterprise software. But enterprise software we define pretty broadly. We look at horizontal and vertical SaaS. We look at developer tools. We look at security, infrastructure, business marketplaces. So it's a pretty wide canvas of things that we look at.
That's great. And we have, I think, a lot of international founders here. And they just like one direct questions. Do you invest in only US-based companies, or do you also invest internationally?
Absolutely invest internationally. And I'd say we've been doing more and more of that over the last, so we've been in existence for 7 years. We've invested in companies, 4 companies that have come out of Australia. We've invested in companies that have come out of Switzerland. I actually just made an investment, signed a term sheet yesterday in a company out of Africa. So we're very open-minded about investing internationally. And I think one of the great things of COVID is that whatever bias there was to invest locally because you could meet people in person, I haven't met a founder in person since March 15th or whatever it is. And I think that'll actually be to the benefit of international entrepreneurs who want to raise money from Silicon Valley. So we're super excited about the opportunities that we're seeing, internationally.
So all of your communication with founders are now remotely. So you're also calling with Zoom and stuff like that, right?
Yep, exactly. So one of the challenges has been trying to figure out how to have, I think as seed and Series A investors, we're trying to really get to know the people that we're going to be in business with for 10 years potentially. And so we've been trying different experiments in how to kind of make sure we're having authentic interactions and really getting to know people before we invest, including doing Zooms on a weekend and eating breakfast together and just trying to have a little bit more of that interpersonal connection before we make an investment. But yes, it's been 100% via Zoom. I think I may get together with an entrepreneur, the one I just mentioned. We might try to do like a socially distanced walk sometime in the next week or 2, but that will be the first entrepreneur I've met in person since March 15th.
Well, that's great. I think it gives like more opportunity both to you and to international founders. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about, as an early stage investor, what do you look for in startups and founders that you invest in?
Yeah. Well, I think, again, as an early stage investor, the single most important thing is the team. And that's, every VC is going to say that, but it's really true. You're investing at a really early stage. There's lots of risk, and you're making a bet on the person and their ability to navigate all of the challenges that are ahead, the ones that you know and think about, and the multitude of challenges that you have no clue about. You know, there's so many unknown unknowns when you make an early stage investment. So I spent a lot of time with founders and try to understand them. And I think there's a bunch of different things I look for. I'll highlight a few. Like one is I really like founders that understand their markets really, really well. To me, that demonstrates both passion and kind of commitment, but also demonstrates intellectual curiosity and ability to go deep on problems. And so I often spend, the bulk of my first conversation just like, tell me about the problem you're solving. Who are the players? Why are you thinking this is an interesting problem? Why is it big? Why is your approach unique? Like very, very focused on the market. And it's not just because I'm interested in the market, but it's also for me a way to get a feel for the person and how they think about problems. More personally, I think the thing that I really value in entrepreneurs is being able to balance this belief in yourself and grit and determination with the humility to know what you don't know and delegate your weaknesses and accept input. And it's a really hard thing to balance because, imagine mostly entrepreneurs in this call, like entrepreneurs are the bravest people in the world. And you have to have a deep belief in yourself to go and make a bet on yourself and start a company. And it's also the case that nobody has the full set of skills they need to build the company. You've got to build your team and you've got to take input and develop on your weaknesses. And so I try to ask questions that give me a sense of like both this person's passion, commitment, grit, tell me about a time you failed, and also a little bit about their ability to accept input, their ability to delegate, their understanding of where their weaknesses or gaps are. So that's probably the second thing that I'd highlight. And then another thing that maybe the last one I'll highlight that is a bit of a balance is like balancing the near-term pragmatism with the long-term ambition and optimism. Like we're investing in companies that we believe have potential to be multi-billion-dollar companies. And so like, I want to hear that you can dream big and what your vision for the company can be. And yet, what does today call for? It calls for like making sure you're making payroll, not burning too much money. What are the key hires you need to be working on? And so trying to get a sense for both of those. And that's, again, I think something that's really hard to balance, but the best founders do it really well. So that's what I look for in founders. And, there's lots of stuff we look for in products and markets that I think are probably less relevant and frankly, less important. So I'll stop there.
Thank you. Actually, there was lots of good points here. And I want to say to everyone, if you have any questions, please just jump right in the conversation. You can turn on your video or just the sound, and you can interrupt us if you'd like. But I have another question. You're not only investing in startups, right? You also have some portfolio startups right now, and they may experience some difficulties during the current situation. What do you think is what's the best way to support these startups? What are you doing in this kind of direction?
Yeah, well, I think we have a bunch of different ways that we support companies. Some that I think every VC would claim, and then some that I think are specific to our firm. I think the most important thing is being the sort of trusted confidant of the entrepreneur and a thought partner to think through different problems, strategic questions, the day-to-day of just like having a third party who isn't part of the company, but understands it really well. And also has the vantage point of being able to see a bunch of other companies that are trying to navigate this crazy world and seeing what's working in other companies and also what isn't. So I think a lot of my time is just conversations one-on-one with entrepreneurs and trying to help them think through problems. There are more direct operational ways that we engage. We have an operating platform that spends their time with our portfolio, helping them work on key hires, think through sales compensation, think through what their marketing strategy should be. And I play a role in that, but we have, focused operating partners that spend time there. I think it was going to make one meta point for the current environment is I think the world's more dynamic and crazy than it's ever been. I don't think that's even a controversial statement to make in 2020. And what I encourage all of our entrepreneurs to do is to be in what I call be in an athletic stance. So be ready to make changes, understand where things could, where the rug could be pulled out from under you and what you'll do if let's say we miss this quarter. What are we going to do if we miss this quarter? On the flip side, if we see that things are being massively pulled forward by COVID, as they are in many companies in the portfolio, should we be ramping up burn and making more aggressive bets and hiring more quickly? There's no one size fits all answer to these questions because every company is different and every industry is being impacted differently. But like the generic piece of advice is like, be in a position where you're ready to make decisions quickly and where you're thinking through all of the ways something can play out. And so a lot of my time is just thinking through scenario analysis with our portfolio companies.
Do you think this dynamic, sorry, Dennis, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry, it's a delay between us. Sorry for that.
Yeah, no problem. So I just wanted to ask you if this dynamic environment somewhat affects you, like as a venture capital, do you start picking companies faster, investing faster, maybe make your decisions faster? Does it work that way?
Yeah, I think the most unexpected consequence of COVID for our business has been when it happened, I think everyone assumed that venture markets would slow down because there's so much uncertainty. And I honestly think the answer is they've sped up. And I think there's a combination of reasons for that. I mean, one, if you look at the NASDAQ and publicly traded tech stocks, they're all trading at mostly all-time highs. And so I think that's led to a little bit of euphoria in the market and outcomes seeming bigger. And TBD, I'm not weighing in on whether that will hold or not, but I think there is a reality that when public market tech stocks are at an all-time high, early stage venture is more frothy and people are more excited to make bets. But I actually think the biggest one is just a process change, which is 95% of the industry operated under a norm, which is we have to meet people in person before we make an investment. And I'll own, like, we had never made an investment in someone we hadn't met in person pre-COVID, and we've done 6 now. And I think the dynamic of not having to meet in person just makes things move faster. You don't have to work out schedules and travel. And so as a result, deals just moving way quicker. And I think, I've got a bunch of portfolio companies that have been raising in COVID, and the feedback I've gotten from entrepreneurs is like, it's kind of great. Like, I don't have to go, drive up and down Sand Hill all day and try to figure out when I'm going to be in the city and when I'm going to be in the peninsula and when I'm going to fly to Chicago to meet the 2 Chicago VCs that are interested and the New York VCs. And so I think it's actually a really positive development, as long as one can balance it with the fact that you do need to really get to know the people in both directions. Like, VCs should really get to know the entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs should really get to know the VC. I think it is possible to do it over Zoom. I just think you have to be deliberate about it.
John, I have a question. So we're speaking about the remote world and it's a remote conference, but I don't see remote specific products on the scene. So basically the product is about collaboration. So collaboration, like mutual collaboration, like remote collaboration, but it's not remote specific topic. It's a like really common one. Do you see any, but as we hear from the employee side, that there is like loneliness when you work remotely, and we need some products to be like, don't feel like lonely. And it's a depression when you work remotely, the rates are much higher. Do you see any products on that space which is like dealing with the situations like that?
Yeah. I haven't seen any products that are specifically tackling the problem of remote employee engagement and happiness. I've seen a lot of products that are generic, like how do you keep your team engaged and happy? And certainly there's a bunch of companies in the mental health tech space as well, but I haven't seen one that's specifically focused on remote. I think it's a great observation and an interesting question, which is like, will there be products that are specifically built for remote versus just built generically? I think a lot of the companies that have been in the employee engagement space, and there's many of them, are trying to quickly move their product to be, to serve the remote workforce. I think it's an open question whether that, and by the way, the same is true across every software category, right? Like if you look at, pick an old Workday, right? Like the most dominant HRIS system, like they're trying to figure out how to make sure their product can more effectively service a distributed remote workforce. I think the question that I don't know the answer to is whether the move to distributed work is so fundamental that there's an opportunity to build entirely new products around remote work that are that basically incumbents are unable to adapt to this shift. I think they're trying really hard, but I can envision reasons why they'll have a hard time doing it. And we have actually made one investment that kind of fits in that theme. It's a company called Beyond HQ. And their grand ambition, their near-term product looks very different, but their grand ambition is to try to build kind of the first operating system for distributed teams. That includes both like the HR stack, as well as like the real estate stack, as well as like the operating stack. So.
Thank you very much. Question to the audience. Do you have questions to John? And I highly encourage you to turn the videos, because it's difficult when you don't see the faces and the reaction. If you have any questions concerning the investment in a remote and investment like globally, or you as an employee want to like have a specific idea, it's the moment to ask. But
actually, I have one more question. Oh, sorry, Jay, go ahead.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So, hi, John. Thank you for your insight. So, one question I have for you as a VC investor. What I guess it depends on the product, but generally, besides the first point as in a strong team, how much traction do you look for in an investment? I mean, I know it can vary, but generally, like on maybe a company on a startup that would need a lot of users to be successful, not necessarily like the most advanced technology, but you know, how much traction for like maybe a social company or yeah, a thing like that, if I could ask.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll say I don't know that my answers are going to be super satisfying here, but it's the truth, which is like, it depends. You know, we've invested in teams that are 2 people and 10 PowerPoint slides and pre-product. And we've invested in companies that are, you know, 5 million in ARR and have, you know, very built out teams and very built out business. So I think traction helps. I don't personally prerequisite. Hey, Joe, how's it going? It's not a prerequisite for us to invest. Now, Spit, you mentioned a social product. Like we're enterprise investors, so I would say I'd probably ask consumer investors what they need to see. And I do think in consumer, traction may be more important because getting some early signals of virality and engagement are really important. Whereas in enterprise software, if someone's like, look, this is the problem, I understand it better than anyone, here's software that clearly solves the problem, I think it's a little easier to sort of say like, yes, someone will pay for this, versus consumer, which has a little bit more of a, you know, catching lightning in a bottle dynamic.
Yeah. Thank you.
Do we have any questions to John? Hey, audience, wake up, please. So I understand it's already 3 hours we're here, but please wake up. Do we have any questions about the investments, or most of the questions about like from employee side of the remote work?
So we're all here alive and well, listening and learning a lot, at least from my perspective. So don't worry.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you. I'm glad that you're alive all 3 hours. Thank you very much. I want to introduce our next guest. It's Joe Blair. And Joe, thanks for coming. And I will introduce you a bit later, but I want to start to continue the conversation with John. I know that in months, I believe, will be distributed to Wally. It's a remote startup expo. So the question for us was, as we see, there are no specific like remote startups. There are like collaboration startups, and it's existed like for a long time. Do you think should we focus exactly on remote, or it's like general things and there is no way we have to build products specifically for remote? And do you know any remote specific products?
Yeah, great question. So first off, Den, thanks for having me. Second off, it's always unwise following John Cowgill because he's so awesome, but I'm going to do my best. And yeah, to your point, we are thrilled to invite all of you to the third Remote Startup Expo coming up on October 14th. So it's actually sooner than a month. It's actually in 2.5 weeks or so, and it's at 9 a.m. Pacific time. You're all invited. It's going to be a blast. And to your point, this question of around like remote versus not remote is a fascinating question. But I think that what we have to recognize is that what happened, 6 months ago, right, is an experiment that never would have been run without the pandemic, right? So large corporations would have never in a million years said, hey, let's just run a 6-month experiment, see if everyone can work from home, and if seamlessly everything will just continue to work out as good as it was, right? It never would have happened. And so, but a lot of these corporations were forced to do this, forced to run this experiment. And I think that, before COVID happened, there was this debate of like, people going to be more productive, less productive, like, and whatnot. And I think the verdict is in, right? Like people can be just as productive, and in fact more productive at home and remotely than in person. People are seeing the real life benefits of cutting out the commute, of being able to manage a dynamic schedule, being able to like leverage existing tools. There was never a technical reason why we couldn't do this. It was more of a psychological. There was more of a psychological barrier. So what this experiment proved is that the possibilities of how we work are vastly more wide than we ever believed them to be. So to your point of what is a remote startup? What is a remote tool? What is a collaboration tool? Yeah, you're right in that it's not one specific thing. It's not one specific class of companies. And so we're calling it the Remote Startup Expo for two reasons. Number one is it's an all virtual event, right? Which is kind of is common these days. But when we started this a year ago, it was a pretty new idea. And then the second reason is because, like we said, there has been this massive black swan event where everyone kind of is acknowledging some of the benefits of working remotely. And so, whereas we started, I think, last year and 6 months ago with, okay, what are the tools that you can use to be more effective, and what are the startups that are innovating in this space? Now we're kind of evolving the conversation to, okay, now we're more familiar with some of these tools and best practices and whatnot. But the more interesting question, which we're trying to solve, or which we're trying to answer with this event, is what are the short and, more importantly, the long-term effects of this massive work from home movement? And how is it affecting all different areas of the economy, from productivity, to be sure, but also things like education, healthcare, commerce, infrastructure, and what does the new normal really look like? So the sub theme is winning in the new normal, and really highlighting the companies and sectors that have just experienced incredible commercial acceleration in the last 6 months. When, as VCs, John will tell you too, a lot of us were in the very early months were worried a lot of some of our companies were going to be in real trouble. And we all have a few companies in our portfolio that we thought were going to be in trouble, but actually have been doing better than ever. And that's a really interesting signal that we want to pay attention to and we want to focus on during the event. And we're excited to have you too, Dan, as a speaker at the event.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I want to introduce Joe. Joe is an investor at Kota Capital, and he runs the distributed Volley Expo, where he invites like remote startups, and not only remote, I believe, from all over the world, but the startups who solves the problem of the remote collaboration, communication, and data. And as Joe invited, I've sent the link to the chat, just come. So everyone is invited as a listener, I believe. And I agree with you that you have started a year and a half ago, you said, with the first expo, and we started with that like remote conference, like the first time it was in January, I believe. And it was interesting because for like, it was 7 months ago or more already, but everyone was extremely interested in remote work. So how to do that? Is it possible to work remotely? Is it possible to find a remote work? But now I see that everyone is sick and tired about the conversation about like remote work, how to build it, and so on and so forth. And everyone wants to see like another perspective, how to have the next step on how to work remotely, how to not just start to work remotely, but how to do that like more productively. And I see also another trend at the platform is that more and more companies started to hire remotely, and more like employees started to apply for the remote jobs. So it's what you are saying, the new normal when something is changing. And also I see between my friends that they're moving from the city centers to the rural areas. They're trying to buy the bigger apartments, houses, and so on and so forth, and they work remotely and then don't care where to live. It's interesting because since COVID, Ksenia visited, I believe, 6 or 7 countries, even during the COVID. And yes, she is stuck at Bali for 5 months, but it's extremely the new normal. So for me, it's difficult to track where she is because every week it's another city. But actually, in terms of productivity, I don't care because she like do the same job wherever they are. It's a great shift. Sorry, I have to ask you: do you have any presentation, or we can talk as we talk right now?
Let's just keep talking like we're talking right now. That'd be great.
Perfect. Okay, so just for your information, we have people just here at Zoom and they can ask any questions they want. We have people also broadcast on YouTube. We don't see any questions on YouTube, unfortunately, and we don't track them. So just we invite people here. And can you just, previously it was Karen, she's HR advocate, really famous one, and she's saying that VR will change how people communicate to each other, and all the remote problems like loneliness and so on, VR will solve that. And I previously asked John, do you have any startups on portfolio, and do you see any prospect, like any startups who will implement VR technology, and VR technology will solve all the remote issues, and we will start working like globally, remotely, without like boundaries because of VR? Or you think it's like not possible in the near future?
Yeah, great question. So I don't think there's a silver bullet necessarily, at least right now. We do have a portfolio company that's doing AR for the manufacturing industry. It's called a Theer. It's manufacturing and industrial type customers, serving automotive and the like. So I think there will be, vertical specific tools that kind of help with that solution. There's also a company in New Zealand that I'm aware of that is doing it has a unique take on the virtual office. It's called Remotely HQ. It's kind of like SimCity meets Tandem Chat. It's a really interesting concept. And then again, the answer is not necessarily going to be all, where we all plug into the matrix every day and don't leave our beds. I think, some amount of in-person hybrid type of interaction is going to be necessary and healthy. And so in my personal portfolio, I'm an investor in Cody, which is a kind of physical platform for distributed work, where it's kind of like the Airbnb for co-working, and has like distributed residential based co-working spaces in major cities. So I think you're going to see kind of a proliferation of startups and solutions to address individual kind of use cases in different areas and across different industries.
The next question, thank you very much. The next question for both of you, John and Joe. So we have some attendees like from different countries, like from Africa, from India, from Eastern Europe. And the question is, what they say, it's difficult to find a remote job if you are live in Africa or in, I don't know, in India or in Russia, because there is really concept that you have to hire people with the preconcept that you have to hire people with the same culture. Before we talk about the shifts, in understanding, do you think it will change in the next 5 or 10 years, or it's not possible in that kind of short time frame? I'm sorry. 3 hours of talking.
Yeah, no, I think to me, that's a short-term problem. I would say again, it's the psychological barrier. Like I mean, there are a couple, kind of practical factors. Like one would be time zone, a second would be language, and then the third would just be, kind of cultural uniformity, like as we all become global citizens. And I think those are sort of all solvable problems. And I think kind of as this kind of remote trend continues and it becomes more normal, again, if someone has the proper language skills and can accommodate the time zones and is trained and a strong communicator, then there's no reason why it couldn't work. It's just, I think employers, have to get comfortable with it. It's going to start with some early adopters, and then it's just going to grow and become the normal. So I don't see it as kind of a systemic problem. To me, it seems more like a short-term growing pains type of an issue.
I'd echo all that and say, I think there are CEOs in our portfolio who have in the last weeks told me like, oh man, my mentality around hiring remote has completely changed. So I think it is happening, and I think it'll take time. I think it is still the case that, especially early stage companies are thinking really deliberately about like, how do I know this person's good? The cost of making a hiring mistake at early stage is significantly greater than it is at a later stage company. So I guess I think two implications. One, I think it's probably still better to focus your effort maybe on a little bit later stage companies, just that have a little more pedigree and can afford the cost of, a fit that doesn't end up working out. I'd also say, I think the more that you can demonstrate your work product and give confidence that you kind of are who you say you are. So if you're a developer, GitHub, if you're a designer, showing a Figma portfolio, things like that, I think that actually is a really helpful way to sort of bridge a barrier. Because I think there is a little bit of like, oh, if we can't meet in person and you're going to be working remotely, I just, how do I assess your skill? And so the more you can kind of show versus tell, I think that's good as well.
It's interesting, actually. At 6 Nomads, we're hiring, we're remote first team, and we're ready to hire globally. And we launched that platform for developers where you can find the best developers possible over the world. But the problem is we're hiring, the question for all attendees, we're hiring like community manager right now, and we're hiring, I would say, happiness, support and happiness manager. And we are ready to hire globally, but we don't know where to post a job to get the global talent. So basically, when you go to the US job boards, you get US talent. When you go to the Russian job boards, you get Russian talent. When you go to the, I don't know, Middle East job boards, you just get the talent from Middle East. But we're open to the talent everywhere, but we want like to give them to see our job open. And I personally believe there is a huge space for development in the remote space where, and unfortunately, we're not ready to start from scratch, like with another specialities, not only for developers, but content marketers, for I don't know, for community managers and so on and so forth. But personally, I need the platform where I will be able to attract like really global talent, not the local one. And there is no like such a product on the scene right now. So maybe on Monday we have to think about how to launch like another layers of people we can hire through 6 Nomads, or any other startups can be launched in that scene, because it's I know a lot of people are searching for a job, but as a CEO, I don't know where to post a job to get those people. So it's a kind of two sides problem.
Sounds like a market opportunity.
Yes, a great one. Yes, and yes, it's interesting. Okay, do we have any other questions with the audience? Because we can continue like talking to each other, because we already know each other. And so do we have any other questions, guys? I see a lot of people with the cameras. Sasha, you're here. I'm glad you're here. Sasha is the first speaker, and he told us how to how to become the remote leaders, like how to build. There is a new positions called head of remote, and Sasha told us how to train that leadership and what the person should do. Sasha, do you have the questions about the remote startups and investing in the remote world?
Well, first, it's a small world again, because Joe and I, actually, we met a couple months ago, but we went to the same college in Pennsylvania. So we didn't know each other in college, but I think we overlapped a couple years actually while we were there. So small world in general. And actually, nice to see you too. Actually, what Dan is bringing up, I'd like to hear Joe's perspective on this, because he asked me specifically about head of remote and those roles that are popping up, especially within tech organizations. And my point of view is actually that most organizations, because I mostly work and consult and train large organizations, large enterprises, that they need a head of hybrid role. Actually, it's not head of remote, it's head of hybrid. It's head of making sure that the workforce strategy, the learning and development strategy, the diversity and inclusion strategy, including location diversity and inclusion, is actually very holistic. It should not be remote and the people who go into an office. It should be the whole ecosystem. So actually, I would love to hear, Joe, if you have any perspective, or John too, on how you're thinking about even the tech companies you're working with and head of remote versus something else.
Yeah, great insight there, Sasha. Well, in fact, this is top of mind for me, because I was thinking about this earlier today, in that, like, now that we're at the point where certain industries, certain areas of the country, certain areas of the world are starting to go back to work, it's ironic because, in person was sort of well understood. Everybody in person all the time was sort of well understood. And then we all went fully remote, and that was a challenging transition, but we kind of made it work. And now we're in this additional transition of, like, okay, how do we find a hybrid and a middle ground? And it's the ironic piece is that everyone fully remote is actually easier than hybrid.
Exactly.
Because everyone's on the same playing field, everyone's on the same page, everyone can use the same tools, best practices, whatnot. But then once you start to integrate people back into the office, you have a couple of different considerations. You have, people have different commutes. Some people drive and have long commutes. Other people, leverage public transportation, which has health issues. Some people have families and, take care of kids and take care of elderly folks. So they're kind of more like, the downside risk of them getting the virus is a lot higher than other people. And then you've got people whose styles just work better in person or without person. So how, as an organization, do you set a policy where, on one hand, you could have it be very free form and people come in if they want, if they don't want to, they don't have to. And on the other hand, you could be a bit more structured about it, to have, certain people in the office certain days a week. And that has the added advantage of, you kind of know how many people you're gonna have in the office. You can set like a max limit. You can spread people out. You know how many people are gonna be in a room, for example. But it's super complicated, and there's no right answer for every company, for every team. And so, I guess I'm trying to say I wholeheartedly agree with the insight there, that hybrid is the hardest thing. Hybrid is the next challenge for everyone to overcome. And so, I think a head of hybrid is a more appropriate title than head of remote, for sure.
Yeah, that's
just to layer on with that.
Oh, go ahead, John.
Oh, sorry, Sasha, please go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, just to layer in, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I'm really interested to see how this operating model develops and different experiments that people run, whether it's like, because I think, pretty strongly for most companies, everyone's in the office 9 to 5, Monday to Friday model is dead. And the question of, like, does everybody take Friday off, or do you have engineers come in certain days? And other salespeople come in other days, like that seems kind of crazy, but like maybe there's something there, or maybe you could design it around sprints and epics. And so like everybody comes in for 2 days and you define your work plan for the next 3 weeks, and then you go off on your own, and it's a flexible model. I think you'll see a lot of experiments, and there's probably a market opportunity there, but I think there's also just like Silicon Valley has distilled a lot of best practices around how to run your business. And I think that whole toolkit of best practices will need to be adapted to hybrid organizations. And I have no clue what the right answer is. And I don't think anyone does. I think we have to go run those experiments and see what works.
I see a comment from Benjamin. Sorry, Sasha. Benjamin, you can go ahead and just turn on your mic and jump into the conversation.
Hey, everybody. Thanks. This has been a really great chat. Thanks for letting me join. Yeah, I'm an office broker here in the Bay Area with an office downtown. And I feel like we turned a corner about 2-3 weeks ago, where a lot of the companies that we've been consulting with that initially had said, we plan on working remotely indefinitely, have completely turned around. They're saying, well, I think that there's probably a place to come back to an office because, essentially what we've learned from COVID and this forced work from home is that we don't need an office to work. That's not why we go there. Because as we're all proof of, we can work anywhere. We go to the office for the collaboration, the interaction, the brainstorming of ideas, nurturing that company culture. And so, I think what's most telling too is we have a bunch of active subleases on the market right now, and we've gotten like no interest all summer long, like crickets. And then all of a sudden, the last, I would say 2-3 weeks, we've been getting tour requests from companies who are saying, all right, we know there's a safe way to go back. Show us how to do it. And I think like you're all seeing and saying is that it's going to have to be some type of a hybrid model, right? Just to strike the work-life balance. But even if you can say, we're working with a company right now on developing this kind of rolling day off thing where everyone in the company doesn't go to the office one day of the week, and that changes every week. So this week I don't go in on Monday, next week I don't go in on Tuesday. And what that does is it kind of keeps the company cycling. You've immediately reduced your footprint by 20%, right? By taking one person out of the office every week, which allows for spatial distancing because we just can't be working on the density that we've been doing. But then also you can commute you take your commute time by a fifth, take that off, which you get all those hours back. And then also every third week, you've got a 3-day weekend. So stay in Tahoe through the weekend or go down to Palm Springs, and kind of that readjustment of work-life balance so that you still, because we can work from anywhere, but then you still have that connection to the office where that's where the idea, a lot of the ideas happen. And what we're also hearing from our clients is that, they're saying, hey, it's not just the supervision of our employees where we know you're just because your Slack channel is on, we know you're not really working, but also just the mentorship. A lot of the younger workforce is saying, hey, we took this job at this company because we thought the older people were going to be looking over our shoulders and mentoring us. And we were going to learn the biz. And I was going to be part of this either dev team or sales culture. And we're kind of missing that. So I think there's a place for both worlds to exist for sure.
Totally agree. I love the rolling model. That's super interesting. I might propose that to some of our companies. And
see if it works.
I totally. And I mean, look, we're all here because we're excited about this brave new world that we're entering. But I will echo a point that I think there's, really curious to hear if you agree with this, Joe. Like even in the last few weeks, I've started to feel like some of the hidden costs of this dramatic overnight shift to fully remote for companies that have historically operated in person have started to be felt. I'd say initially people thought it was gonna be really disruptive, and it actually wasn't. And in a weird way, I think there was even some productivity gains from like less distractions in the office, developers heads down, everybody knew what they were doing. And I think we're sort of in this last month, I've started to have conversations with the portfolio of like, man, we're starting to really have some, internal misalignment, or like we're trying to do Q4 planning and it's super hard, or like I need to give somebody really tough feedback and I hate doing that over Zoom. So I think, again, I'm very bullish on distributed work. I don't want to, but at the same time, there's a hybrid model that I think is probably going to be the right one for most organizations, but not for all. So I don't know. I'm curious, Joe, have you been getting some of that feedback from your portfolio as well?
A little bit. I mean, the bigger piece of feedback that I've been getting is more around burnout, right? As we discussed. So the people are definitely more productive, or can be as productive or more productive, but there's fewer opportunities to kind of unplug, or there's less of a forcing function to unplug, to walk out the office, go to the bus stop, go grab a coffee, etc. But I'm really interested in Ben's comment here around just understanding what's happening in the market, and that people are starting to come back, because first off, like, I think one of the big X factors here, beyond just the pandemic, was 5-6 months ago, when some of the big tech companies started to say, we're going to go permanently remote. And as you guys know, Twitter was one of the first big companies to do that. And actually at the expo, our keynote is Jennifer Christie, who's the chief HR officer of Twitter, and is going to be talking about that decision. But the other kind of aspect on the real estate side that I've been really interested about, and Ben, wonder if you have an opinion about this, but just is where people live, right? So what I've been hearing about and observing is, you've got people, in the outskirts of the cities that are moving to different states. You've got people in the cities who are moving to the outskirts of the cities. You've got rents going down, and certain places hard to fill within cities. And then I've also just heard recently of founders from other cities taking advantage of that and moving to the Bay Area. And so I'm wondering, from other people kind of on the panel, what they're seeing in the real estate side of things, and kind of like how some of these forces are coming together.
Well, I mean, Joe, to answer your question from the real estate perspective, we're actually seeing more attrition from leaving San Francisco. We spoke to a company yesterday where, my friend Martin, he's like, you know what, my wife and I, we just bought a house in Austin, and just like that, they're unplugging and going to Austin. We're also seeing, I think you make a good point, that it really does matter where your employees are coming from. A lot of our clients who have big offices downtown, they don't feel safe. You can create the most safe office, but if you have to get on BART, or take a crowded bus, it kind of all goes out the window. What we are seeing in terms of the who is returning to an office, it correlates to two factors: non-tech and smaller companies. And so professional services, CPAs, law firms, pharmaceutical, the lab, those spaces are thriving. Those are booming. You can't find lab space right now in San Francisco or South San Francisco. They're all getting absorbed. Also, the tech workforce is just way more tech enabled. It's much easier for them to work remotely. Whereas some of the older workforce, the Zooms, it doesn't work for them. They need to go into an office. So those are the ones that are returning. We're also, just as you brought up the point that the big tech firms, everyone kind of has been modeling after, okay, don't return until next year, and Google and Facebook and Twitter. Well, on the other end, and kind of supporting what we're seeing, is that, JP Morgan Chase 2 weeks ago issued an order where they're forcing all their employees back to an office. They're saying, unless you have childcare issues or health problems, you got to go back to an office. And so we kind of think that they're kind of like the penguin on the iceberg, right? You wait for the one, and if it doesn't get eaten by a whale, then everyone else jumps in. And we think they're the penguin on the iceberg. And a lot of companies that we've been talking to have just been waiting for a big company, a big name like JP Morgan Chase to say, all right, you're going back to an office. But it also correlates with their professional services. It's much harder for them to, the tech workforce, it's much easier for tech to work remotely. But one of the things, I was talking to one of my clients who is, a big household name, publicly traded company. He said, one of the things that a lot of these remote workers don't understand is that once they start choosing to work remotely, if you can work from Walnut Creek or Austin, you can work from anywhere, and then I can push your job overseas. Because for a lot of companies to have a distributed workforce, and where you don't have, and to have an employee over here, an employee over here, where you don't really have nexus, it's very expensive for a lot of companies. There are tax implications. You're not leveraging various economies of scale if you're having an office for them. But essentially, what we've seen is that this COVID event has really just accelerated a trend we've seen for the last 10 years, and that is to push a lot of talent into Asia, Eastern Europe, and that's a trend. I mean, that's a trend that we'll probably continue to see. And this administration and the cancellation of various visas isn't making it any easier to bring people over. So who knows where that's going to go. But a buddy of mine who works at a big tech company who has the option to go into the office he told me something really weird the other day. He's like, I've been going to the office because I feel like working from home, I don't have any job security. I feel like any day I'm going to get that email that says, you know what, we don't need you anymore. So he goes, at least if I feel like I'm in the office, I'm being seen, I'm doing work, and the people that hire me can see that. And so it really is. It goes both ways.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this goes back to Sasha's point around like why hybrid is so challenging, because but it's both a challenge and it's an opportunity, right? Sorry, I'm not sure what that was, but yeah, it's a challenge and it's an opportunity, right? And at the limit, you could imagine that if you have the flexibility to come into the office, that works better for you. If you have the flexibility to hire remotely and geographically, then you could end up with the best talent in the best positions where you need them. And so maybe that means that that person that left the office and moved to Austin, they don't have as much job security, but that could be an opportunity for someone who is in Eastern Europe or Africa or whatnot. And the same goes for the person in the office. Like, just because you come into an office every day doesn't mean you're the best employee or that, people want to see you every day. Like, you still have to perform. So I definitely agree. There's challenges, there's complications. And this just goes back to, I think, Sasha's point about, how, having someone quarterbacking it and running experiments like John mentioned, I think is just so crucial in these uncertain times.
And to add to that, what you said about JP Morgan Chase, for example, like what they're forgetting is that they're a huge multinational company that was already working in hybrid and virtual teams even before the pandemic. So to push people back into the office, it's a false sense of security of co-location because those teams are already having to work virtual. So, I teach a lot of these virtual leadership skills to large enterprises. And the skills that are important now as people were working fully remotely and then as people are going back into this hybrid organization are important now and are going to continue to be important into the future.
Thank you guys for the conversation. It was really super interesting things to be at and to host, of course. If you have any other questions, guys, please just ask them. Otherwise, we're getting closer to the grand finale of our conference today. Do you have any questions?
I apologize, but I have to hop. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you, John.
Wrap up.
It was
Thanks
a pleasure to have
Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for those who spent 3 hours with us. It was a pleasure to have you. It's difficult for us. I believe it's difficult for you. Sasha, Joe, John already left. Thank you very much for coming. See you soon. It was really nice to have you. If you have any questions, we will share all the recording on the website. And I believe also we will send the presentation. Sasha would really appreciate if you can send the presentation to us so we can share with the audience. Thank you very much for those.
And we'll see you all at the expo.
Yay.
Distributedvalley.co. Go ahead
Yes,
and register.
perfect.
All right.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
See you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, guys.